Hey, everybody. Thanks for waiting. A little bit of a delay in starting, but here we are. Glad that you're here tonight. Should be a good show. We're just doing our usual evening thing. Going to chat about different stuff. So thanks for being here. Yeah, let's jump right into it.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Hey, everybody. Good to see you. Good to see you. We're doing our usual thing tonight. So the way we do these streams, for those of you who may not be familiar, I give my opening remarks. While I'm giving the opening remarks, people are sending in their questions, Rumble rants on the Rumble. And if you want to send a super chat, you can't send it over YouTube, so you can Cash App me. Questions can be sent via Rumble rant or Caleb Moppin 22 on Cash App. Those are the two ways that you can send your questions in. Questions are always appreciated. That's what makes the second half of the show so much fun. Send in your questions for the second half of the show. That's a good way to, get me talking, etc. Couple announcements. First announcement is we are going to have the biggest event that we have ever had in Chicago on July 12th. This will be the largest event that the Center for Political Innovation has ever had. We expect over 400 people to attend. Now, it's challenging. It's going to be a lot of work to fill up that auditorium, but we are up to the task. I was just in Chicago, and our team is handing out booklets and, hanging up door hanger flyers and doing great stuff. It's going to be awesome. If you come to one event this year, make it this one. This will be the biggest event the Center for Political Innovation has ever done. It's going to be very, very exciting. You don't want to miss it. It's going to be absolutely awesome. See you there. It'll be at the Midwest Conference Center on July 12th. It's going to be awesome. So, hey, you can get picked up. Register on the website, and we'll arrange for someone to pick you up. That's just how it works, right? We provide transportation. If you're in the area and you need transportation, we'll provide it. So go ahead and sign up on the website. That's why we're having people register ahead of time, is so, if you need some transportation, you can get it. So I'm glad you said that, Kalimba, because we have an answer. So go ahead and register. Kalimba. And we'll have somebody pick you up, right? That's the idea, is we want to make sure that everyone can get there. So go ahead and register so we can be in touch with you. And it's going to be the biggest event that we've ever done. It's going to be great. So I'm really looking forward to it. So that's really the main announcement we've got. But other than that, we're just doing this the same way we always do our streams. First, I give my opening remarks, then we do the roll call, and then I answer your questions for the remainder of the show. The way the questions can be sent in, is via Rumble rants on Rumble or Cash App Caleb Moppin 22. That's the way we can do it. So send questions via Rumble rant or Caleb Moppin 22 on Cash App. That's the way to get your questions answered. But yeah, good things are happening. It is Holy Week for Christians this week. And today is what they call Maundy Thursday. And then tomorrow is Good Friday, previously known as Black Friday. And then Saturday, in the English-speaking world, generally doesn't have a name. In the Spanish-speaking world, they call it Sábado Sancto, or the Sacred Saturday. And then Sunday is Easter. I've noticed there's a trend of evangelicals. They don't call it Easter. They call it Resurrection Sunday. Have you noticed that? I've noticed that across social media, and I don't know exactly what that's about. So we're going to ask ChatGPT, why are some Christians calling Easter, quote, Resurrection Sunday instead? I'm asking ChatGPT. ChatGPT replies, great question, Caleb. Some Christians, especially in more conservative, evangelical, or non-denominational circles, prefer the term Resurrection Sunday instead of Easter because they want to emphasize the biblical meaning of the holiday, the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. Here are some of the reasons. But I'm going to ask, when did this shift in terms start? That's what I'm more curious about. The shift from saying Easter to saying Resurrection Sunday started becoming more noticeable in the late 20th century, especially from the 1980s onward, and really picked up steam in evangelical and non-denominational circles in the 1990s and 2000s. So there we go. I did not know that. I'm just noticing that. Now, it's always been Easter as far as I'm concerned. I know Orthodox folks celebrate it a couple weeks after Protestants and Catholics do. They're on a separate calendar. But generally, I've always understood it's called Easter. People have different names for it. And yes, people have pointed out that it is around the spring equinox, right? That, the various Christian holidays. December 25th is Christmas, which is very close to the winter solstice, and Easter is very close to the spring equinox. And many people have observed that, right? And that some of the aspects of the Christmas tradition are very similar to the pagan Germanic Nordic festival of Yuletide, and that Easter, on the other hand, Easter has a lot of similarity to the pagan traditions for May Day, right? The celebration of the spring in pagan tradition. So, I guess that's how these things go. If you're planning to eat a nice Easter dinner with your family, I hope that you enjoy it. I hope it's delicious. If you are planning to not do that, hey, that's up to you. If you're going to have a good spring break from college or from high school or from teaching, good for you. Enjoy your spring break. Hey, you got to just live your life. You got to enjoy it. And there's a reason that holidays were invented. They were invented to give you a break from work. They were invented to give you a chance to connect with loved ones, to attend social gatherings, etc. So what did I do today? Today, I was doing some news reporting, and I was walking around Manhattan. And I will say, I object to the weather. Whoever the weather guy is, the guy who decides the weather, get him on the phone and let me register my complaint. Because New York City, for the last 2 months, can't decide if it's winter or summer, and it's really obnoxious. It'll start to be warm, but you'll go outside and the wind will be blowing and it's freezing. And then it feels warm, and then it's freezing, and then it feels warm, and then it's freezing, and it's freezing and warm at the same time. It's bright like summer, but windy, cold like winter. And It's obnoxious. And I mean, there's part of me, it's like, can it just be warm already? What in the world is going on here? What in the world is going on here? I obviously, there's nothing you can do about the weather, but it is something people love to talk about, right? It is a classic small talk item, the weather. People love to complain about the weather. People love to compare notes about the weather. I noticed it was this way. I noticed it was that way. But, honestly, lately I feel that my complaints about the weather are much more justified because the weather is becoming more erratic. And I have the right to complain about it. I will say, though, it's not global warming. All right. I guess the argument is that because the ocean is heating up, the temperature of the ocean water is becoming warmer. That's causing the weather to be more erratic. Okay, well, I am not doubting that fossil fuels, have an impact to some degree on the climate. I mean, I assume to some degree or other that is true. I don't accept, and I have said many times before, I do not accept climate alarmism. And why do I not accept climate alarmism? Because I am somebody who has worked in sales before. I've worked in sales, and I also have a political background. And I have learned that in sales, if a bad salesman is trying to hustle you, one thing that he will do is he will say, you got to decide right now. You got to decide right now. Oh my God. Oh my God. Every time I've been apartment hunting, the person showing me the apartment says, oh, there's a couple coming tonight, and they're ready to sign the paper. If you want it, you better get it right now. There's somebody coming right behind you. There's this really wealthy family. Oh my God. Right? A way to get someone to do what you want is to not give them enough time to think, right? As you create an emergency in order to get what you want out of them. That is some kind of cheap sales technique. And it's important if you are a consumer and you want to make a good choice to say, whoa, slow down. Let me look this over and see what my best options are. But that is not what I hear from Greta Thunberg. That's not what I hear from mainstream media. I hear, oh my God, we're all going to die from climate change, so you got to vote for the Democrats. You just got to vote for the Democrats. Don't ask any questions. Don't make any demands on the Democrats. Got to vote for the Democrats because of climate change. And oh my God, we're all going to die, so just vote for the Democrats. And it's like, wait, hold up. No. No. Don't you understand? We're all going to die from climate change. Oh my God, they just poured tomato soup on the painting, and we're all going to die. And climate change. Oh my God, got to vote for the Democrats. And it's like, hold up. Woo, Nelly, hold up. So climate change is coming, and we must vote for the Democrats because the Republicans don't take it seriously enough. And so, I mean, it creates this emergency where you must vote for the Democrats because I mean, it's bizarre. It is absolutely bizarre. And when arguments are being framed that way, it makes me think something's not right. And that's not saying climate change isn't a reality. I have no grounds to argue with scientists about it, but I don't like it when someone's doing that. Another thing that I have learned is that kind of rhetoric, the idea that the Republicans are the most scary, evil thing in the world, and if they take office, we're all going to die in a nuclear war, and we're all going to get rounded up and put in death camps. That is the oldest Democratic Party talking point ever. During the Bush years, the Republicans were the main danger during the Bush years. I was coming up during the Bush years, and that's when I first got politically active. And back then, Republicans were the main danger, right? They invaded countries, and if you disagreed with them, you were a traitor. You were working for the terrorists. And also Republicans were pushing forward the attacks on civil liberties. And again, if you questioned it, you must be a terrorist. You must be working for the terrorists, etc. So the Republicans were the main danger. And a very common talking point was, we're all gonna be living under fascism. We're all going to get rounded up and put in prison camps if it becomes more Republican. If the conservatives continue winning, that was a very, very common argument that was being made. And so I remember, as a high school student, I was looking for films to watch, and I watched a film from the 1980s, a movie from the 1980s. That came out. That was about the rise of Nazi Germany. And this film that came out in 1980, it was 1993, actually, was this film that came out. It was a 1993 film called Swing Kids. And it was from 1993, long before George W. Bush had ever even considered running for president. Right? I think that was the Clinton years. Clinton had just gotten in. And you watch this movie, Swing Kids, it was the exact same argument. Fascism is coming in, and it was basically, Republicans are like the Hitler Youth, and you gotta vote for the Democrats because one thing leads to another. And it's this notion that fascism is just gradually coming, right? And that it comes through voting for the wrong candidate, and they're gradually becoming fascist. And that's not accurate in terms of the history of Nazi Germany. And it's just not true, but that has been the Democratic Party's argument, going back to the 70s, really. That's been their argument. Republicans are fascists, and gradually Republicans are going to set up, Hitler's Germany, and so we must vote for them. And it's a way of shutting down any dissent on the Democrat side, because the Republicans are just so scary and they're just so awful, and they're gonna put everyone in concentration camps and set up an authoritarian Nazi state. We just got to put aside any criticism we might have of the Democrats and just hold our nose and vote for the Democrats because the Republicans are so bad. That is the argument. And in the 80s, they even used the argument that there was going to be a nuclear war, right? The earth was going to burst into flames with nuclear weapons. We were all going to die in nuclear winter if Ronald Reagan got elected. Well, Ronald Reagan got reelected in 1984. And after Ronald Reagan was reelected, George Herbert Walker Bush, the first Bush, got into office. 1988, he won the election. And at no point did we have nuclear war. At no point did we all die from nuclear war. Now, there was a substantial anti-war movement during those years. And it was complicated, but the idea that if Republicans win elections, we all die. If Republicans win elections, we all go to concentration camps. That's bull honky. That's just an old trick. But as I said, during the Bush years, the Republicans were the main danger. And you know how you could tell the Republicans were the main danger? Because you weren't allowed to disagree with them. I said this last night, and I'll say this again, right? The side that you're not allowed to disagree with is always the most dangerous side. And during the Bush years, you were not allowed to disagree with Republicans. If you disagreed with the Republicans, it was, oh, why do you hate our troops? It was not somehow disagreeing with George W. Bush and his unilateral invasion of Iraq was hurting the military. This was the argument I constantly heard, right? Is out of respect for our troops, you should not disagree. I mean, George W. Bush even used this. I remember during the 2004 presidential election when he was debating John Kerry. John Kerry was running against him. He's like, what kind of message is this sending to our troops, And it was just, if you disagreed with Bush, you were hurting the military. And, those troops are over there risking their lives in Iraq. So you better not disagree with anything that the Republicans did, because that are troops that might hurt their feelings. It was very weird, even though, there's plenty of Democrats in the military, but somehow if you disagreed with the war, you were disrespecting the troops. That was the argument. And you weren't allowed to disagree with them. If you disagreed with the war, you were disrespecting the troops. You were supporting the terrorists. You were supporting Al-Qaeda. You didn't seem to understand about the innocent people killed on 9/11. That was the argument. You weren't allowed to disagree with them. Well, now the two parties have flipped. because the side that you are not allowed to disagree with is the Democrats. You know, and as I pointed out, if you say to people in the Trump camp, hey, I think what Trump is doing with this Mahmoud Khalil, deporting him from the country for his political views, some of them will say, you know, we got a fair point. You know, I mean, maybe it is a free speech issue, but you know, there's varied opinion, and many Republicans have said, look, I don't agree. Ann Coulter, Thomas Massey, libertarians that voted for Trump, like Angela McCurdle of the Libertarian Party and others, they said, yeah, we don't agree. You know, and the El Salvador thing, I don't agree with that. I think it's obviously wrong to be deporting people to El Salvador. That's not a good thing. And if you say that to Trump supporters, there are many Trump supporters that'll say, okay, well, you got a point, or these gangs are so bad. I mean, but you're allowed to disagree with them. However, if you disagree with the Democrats, oh my God, you're racist. Oh my God, don't you understand? Trump is a Nazi. He's Hitler. We're all going to die. Blah, 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 blah. And it's the exact same thing that the Bush people used to do. If you disagree with the Democrats, and if you don't think that Trump is Hitler, if you don't think Trump is a Nazi, if you don't think Trump is a traitor for secretly working for Russia, if you don't think Trump, then you're a bad person. There's no room for disagreement on the Democrat side. There is room for disagreement on the Republican side. This is a flip. During the Bush years, it was the opposite. During the Bush years, there was no room for disagreement among the Republicans, and there was plenty of room for disagreement among the Democrats. And that I maintain that it's that side that doesn't allow disagreement that is the main danger. And why is that? Well, because at the end of the day, the Republicans and the Democrats, Trump and Biden, Kamala Harris, they all represent U.S. imperialism at the end of the day. They all represent the, American imperialist economic system. They represent different sides of that system, different factions within the ruling class. And the faction that is demanding blind obedience is the faction that is more solidly controlled. And the faction that is open to criticism and, is the faction that is more willing to compromise with anti-imperialist forces. During the Bush years, I went to many Iraq war protests, and there were many Democrats who would march alongside communists, alongside anti-imperialists, and there were people in the Democrat camp who were sympathetic to Cuba. You had the Congressional Black Caucus. You had people like Cynthia McKinney. You had people like Dennis Kucinich, who've been, Dennis Kucinich and Cynthia McKinney. There's no room for them in the Democrat Party anymore. Dennis Kucinich is a Trump supporter. Cynthia McKinney is not in the United States. She's a friend of mine, but she is in Bangladesh, and that, there used to be room for Dennis Kucinich and Cynthia McKinney and John Conyers and all kinds of other people in the Democrat Party. There used to be room for anti-imperialists in the Democrat Party. There is not room for anti-imperialists today in the Democrat Party. Whereas in the Republican Party, you've got Thomas Massey. And Thomas Massey is anti-Israel. Up and down, he wants us to cut off all aid to Israel. He's against U.S. foreign wars and interventions. Thomas Massey, and he's a member of the Republican Party. Trump has scolded him a little bit and dissed him here and there, but he's still, he's a libertarian Republican, and he's allowed to be in the Republican Party. Whereas John Conyers and Dennis Kucinich and Cynthia McKinney are no longer allowed to be in the Democrat Party. This is what I'm telling you, right? Is that the Democrat Party is solidly controlled by imperialism, whereas the Republican Party is on the defensive. And because they're on the defensive, they have to tolerate a Thomas Massey. They have to throw a bone to various things, and they want to negotiate with Russia. And it's complicated. Right. And we're not here to apologize for Trump bombing Yemen. I'm very, very opposed to it. You should read the book we wrote about the Houthis. Right. I mean, read this. Right. I mean, Trump bombing Yemen is wrong. I risked my life on a ship in 2015 trying to get to Yemen with medical aid with the Red Crescent Society. And, I am vehemently opposed to the bombing of Yemen. And we have 1,000 copies of this book we are distributing all over the Chicago area as we build up for our convention. So, I mean, if you think that we are not opposed to the bombing of Yemen, if you think we don't stand in solidarity with the people of Yemen against U.S. imperialism, you're wrong. And we're not going to endorse Trump bombing Yemen. He shouldn't be doing it. It's wrong. We're not going to endorse Donald Trump deporting people for their political views. It's wrong. We're not going to endorse Donald Trump deporting people to El Salvador. That's just inhumane, and it's not right, right? Due process, there's many things wrong with it. But that said, we are going to endorse Donald Trump negotiating a peace with Russia. We are going to endorse Donald Trump negotiating with Iran. It appears that Israel was planning to attack Iran in May, and Trump stopped it. And Trump and Tulsi Gabbard stopped Israel from bombing Iran, and now there are negotiations between the United States and Iran taking place in Oman, the country of Oman in the Middle East. Now that, again, that points to some pretty solid things. It's not a question of Donald Trump getting in there and being a savior of the country on a white horse. It's that Donald Trump being in there because he is at odds. Because he is at odds with the political establishment, there is political space created for people to disagree, for people to be anti-imperialists. And that's really all we can ask for at this point, right? We don't have a mass movement in this country. We should have a mass movement. We need a mass movement demanding justice for working families, demanding an end to the wars, demanding an end to the globalist imperialist system and a government of action. We do not have that. So at this point, basically all we're in a position to get from the establishment, right? We don't have leverage. We don't have a mass movement with which to create leverage to demand bigger concessions. What we do have is the ability to say, hey, we want the side that is less likely to put us in prison. Now, you say, well, Caleb, what about Mahmoud Khalil? Let's just be honest here, right? Mahmoud Khalil is not a U.S. citizen, right? And neither are these people being sent to El Salvador. Now, I think they still have rights. I think that what's being done to them is wrong. However, the People's Democratic Uhuru movement, they are U.S. citizens. Penny Hess, Jesse Neville, Omali Yeshitela, they are U.S. citizens. And under Joe Biden's leadership, they had their doors kicked down. They had the FBI point guns at them, and they were dragged into federal court and faced almost 15 years in prison for nothing other than disagreeing with the war in Ukraine. They alleged that their activism as anti-imperialists was acting as a foreign agent. And they faced almost 15 years in prison. Scott Ritter is an American citizen. He's a veteran. He's a war hero. He's someone who's worked for arms control and saved millions of lives. And what happened? Scott Ritter had his door kicked down and had SWAT teams raid his home, and the FBI raid him, and he was facing an investigation, possibly a prosecution, for allegedly being a foreign agent. Well, new administration comes in, new Attorney General Pam Bondi. She says no more of that. She says the Foreign Agents Registration Act will only be implemented in cases of espionage involving foreign nationals. So no more targeting American citizens for their free speech, and no more prosecuting Americans for what they say. Interesting. Now, what else is interesting is yesterday, the U.S. State Department closed down the Global Engagement Center. Now, the Global Engagement Center, that sounds nice, right? The Global Engagement Center. Don't we want to have global engagement? But what was the Global Engagement Center of the U.S. State Department? Well, according to the State Department, it was an entire wing with a $50 million budget that was dedicated to combating disinformation, i.e., anti-imperialism. Right? It was dedicated to opposing and pushing back against the narratives of Russia and China and Iran and Venezuela, etc. But then, when Marco Rubio liquidated it yesterday, he said that the reason it was shut down was because it didn't just target disinformation. It targeted American citizens. That's what Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State, said. He said that this office that had a $50 million budget, how much can you do with $50 million? That's a lot of money. This office with a $50 million budget, not only were they countering disinformation, but they apparently in the process targeted Americans. Well, I know who one of those Americans that was targeted was. You're looking at him, right? I have been an RT reporter for many years, and you'll notice that I had my reputation run through the mud. All kinds of nasty lies and rumors and exaggerations have been made about me. All kinds of smear pieces have been published against me. And do you think it's just a coincidence? Just a coincidence that there was a department of the U.S. government that's been set up that now the Secretary of State admits targeted American citizens that was set up to counter things like RT? No, there was a whole wing of the U.S. government that was dedicated to defaming people like me, and I was right on the top of their list because I've been Mr. RT for I was the RT guy in America for years. And that there was this whole wing of the State Department that was dedicated to countering disinformation and apparently targeted American citizens in the process. Well, now we know. Yeah, I mean, so I mean, this is where we're at politically. I'm repeating a lot of what I said last night. That's what I'm doing. That's fine. Sometimes you got to repeat yourself in life. Sometimes you got to say things that are important over and over and over again, especially when there is confusion around those points. It's important to make the points again and again and again. That's important. So I do. I do that. But let me add that we on this YouTube channel, I believe this is going to be live stream 886. We have been together here 886 times. 886 times we have been here on this YouTube channel having live conversations. And it's awesome, right? I see Gabby's here in the chat. Gabby's awesome. Gabby's been here for years. She's been part of this, right? I first met Gabby, and yeah, I met her in Chicago. I think the first time we ever met, we went to a restaurant with some other CPI people. It was pretty cool. We're on a mission. We're on a journey, and we're growing. We're growing on this journey. And we have grown spiritually. We have grown politically. We have grown philosophically, and we've learned a lot. We have learned a lot. I think, I think Trump was still in his first term when we started doing these live streams. Now Trump has left office and then come back, and he's in his second term, his non-consecutive term. And we've learned a lot. We have learned a lot. And we are on the cutting edge. We are making amazing breakthroughs, and we have changed the conversation very, very dramatically. And what I have always pointed people towards, is that we're growing, and we have a new philosophy here called innovationism. Right? We have figured out through the course of building and organizing and interacting and learning, we have figured out realities about the world. Years ago, one of the Maoist communist groups, the Revolutionary Communist Party, they used to say, if you want to learn things, you've got to change things. If you want to change things, you've got to learn things. The reason they said that was because that was kind of a concise way of summarizing what Mao Zedong said in his famous essay, Where Do Correct Ideas Come From? Where he said that correct ideas come from practical experience. You can't really learn correct ideas from a book. You learn from struggle, right? And it is through struggle that you learn, and it is through learning that you struggle. And it's this relationship between trying to change the world teaches you how the world works. Learning about how the world works brings you into trying to change it. And that's an important thing, and we've seen that here, and we've learned certain things over the course of this work. One thing that we've learned is that communism ain't it, right? We have evolved beyond communism, right? We've taken the good from communism, and we've left behind a lot of the baggage and a lot of the negative things, right? And this was a big breakthrough, and it was very hard because I would never have gotten into this world of anti-imperialism if it wasn't for communism. I mean, the whole reason I'm here is because when I was a young kid, I got interested in communism. But, through getting interested in communism, I ended up going to college, joining, a communist group. And then I ended up working for Ramsey Clark, the former U.S. Attorney General, and being an International Action Center media representative and appearing on various media outlets representing the International Action Center. I started speaking at international conferences, and then one thing led to another. And, and around the time of the 2016 election, I got very, very frustrated because I could see that the communist groups, they didn't seem to care about opposing imperialism, and they didn't care about the working class. They were just following after whatever the woke people were doing, and that Donald Trump was giving voice to genuine opposition to the status quo, despite all the problems there. And I wanted to engage with the people who supported Trump, and I wanted to build a movement that could actually win, not just feel morally righteous. And so, around the time of the 2016 elections, we started doing different things. We had Students and Youth for a New America, which was like clubs that we formed. And eventually all of that led to, this YouTube channel really got going during the pandemic. It was like right before the pandemic. I was doing a stream. I started doing streams like every Saturday. I would do a stream. And then after a while, then the pandemic hit and we were in lockdown. And then I was streaming every night and I was debating different people. And this channel really started to blow up. And we formed the Center for Political Innovation. And our argument was we're the real communists. We said, the left, they've lost their way and they're not communists anymore. And we didn't want to talk about transgender, and there were transgender people in the group, and there were also people in the group that were opposed to transgender. We didn't want to talk about it. And we were patriotic. We loved our country. And we said that we need a new America beyond imperialism. We united around the slogan, we need a government of action to fight for working families. That was the slogan. We've had that slogan from the beginning, mind you. You go back to live stream number 1. We say we need a government of action to fight for working families. We've been saying that the whole time. And we organized and we built and we made friends and allies and we fought and we've evolved, and a lot has changed and we've learned and we've learned and we've learned and we've learned. And my faith in God has become so essential, right? I mean, I believed in God. I returned to my Christian faith in 2015 in Iran, which is a story I've told on these streams many times, which I'd be happy to tell again, maybe not now, maybe not tonight. But, my faith in God has become more and more important because I've seen how toxic the culture has become and how pessimistic it is. And I've also learned more and more about the importance of optimism and the importance of seeing the world in a positive way and projecting a positive image out into the world. And one thing has led to another, and it's gotten to the point that we are completely blazing new trail. We are innovationists. We have a philosophy that celebrates the human creativity, right? The creative side of humanity, and understands the limits of the means of production functioning according to the chaos of the market, the anarchy of production. And we want growth. We understand that humanity needs to build and construct and get beyond that, and that we need a state that invests in people, because human beings are the source of wealth and creativity. Human beings are the greatest resource and the greatest asset that a country can have. And that we need a pro-family, pro-humanity, pro-growth government that will invest in communities, invest in families. We need to oppose this system of imperialism, globalism, which is basically a degrowth system, holding back development, grinding countries into poverty so Wall Street and London can stay rich by making the world poor. And we need a pro-growth, pro-humanity government of action. That is what we need. And that need the United States to join the new economy around the world that isn't being held back by the irrationality that has the rest of the world restrained, right? That there is a new economy rising in this world. And I've seen this new economy. I've seen it in Iran. I've seen it in Venezuela. I've seen it in Russia. There's this whole new world outside of Wall Street and London's dominion where they believe in growth, where they have pro-growth and pro-humanity governments that are actively investing in their people. And they are not part of this global usury, speculation, derivative ripoff, fictitious capital, fake economy of the West that is leading to everyone getting poorer. And they're building railroads, and they're building high-speed railway and new power plants, and they're cutting edge in fusion energy, and they're getting helium-3 from the moon, and they're electrifying, and they're building new universities, and they're training doctors and engineers and scientists, and there's a whole new world rising. Beyond Wall Street, beyond London, beyond the Western globalist imperialist system. And that new world, it would never have come into being without communism, right? It was the Bolshevik Revolution of 1917 that laid the basis for the Soviet Union. And it was the Soviet Union that laid the basis for the wave of anti-colonial struggles in Africa, for the Chinese Revolution, for all kinds of things. But this global opposition to imperialism has evolved, right? And they now use the market as a very big part of their system. They now don't appeal to that satanic edge within communism, that desire to rebel, that desire for vengeance, that jealousy, that ugly, punitive, vengeful side of communism, right? That legacy of the French Revolution. The communist governments don't appeal to that. And a lot of the anti-colonial, anti-imperialist governments aren't even communist, right? I mean, the Islamic Republic of Iran, they are not communists. They are Muslims, but they say not capitalism, but Islam, neither East nor West, war of poverty against wealth. They have a construction jihad where they mobilize people to build, and that they have built a strong anti-imperialist country, not on the basis of Marxism, Leninism, and dialectical materialism, but on the basis of Shia Islam. But it's basically the same principle, which is that the chaos of the market shouldn't reign supreme, and that you should have a government that comes out of the popular anti-colonial struggle, that invests in people and human beings as the source of all wealth, and you shouldn't have Wall Street and big corporations running things. You should have a state that actively mobilizes and engages the population to build. Certain principles are there, right, in the name of Islam or whatever. And Bolivarian socialism in Latin America, it holds on to the legacy of communism, but it's not classical Marxism. Hugo Chavez was Roman Catholic. Nicolas Maduro is Roman Catholic. The Sandinistas are Christians. The slogan that they have painted all over Nicaragua is Christianity, socialism, and solidarity. I'm really excited about Ibrahim Traoré. Right? If you don't know who Ibrahim Traoré is, you should look him up. We're going to play some video of Ibrahim Traoré here tonight because that guy is awesome. And this is the leader of Burkina Faso. And he is a Muslim, but he's also a Marxist. He's a Muslim Marxist. He was the head of the Marxist Association at his college. He's a military guy. And he's very much, he's a practicing Muslim. He's loyal to his faith, but he also believes in anti-imperialism. He's inspired by Thomas Sankara, the communist leader of Burkina Faso from a couple generations back. He's doing amazing things in terms of agriculture and construction. He's doing amazing, amazing stuff. And is he a communist? Well, not in the way Stalin was, not in the way that Mao was. But if we can understand that it's about opposing imperialism, if it's about having a government that is a pro-growth, pro-humanity government that doesn't let the chaos of the market reign supreme, if that's what's important, great. And we have learned the hard way that as much as we want that to be what communism is about, it's not, right? Communism, especially in America, is not about that. Communism in America is about I don't know, it's about hating mom and dad. It's about hating the flag, hating Christianity. It's about hating America for being an evil, racist settler country. It's about wanting to punish people and hurt people. And it's about a lot of things, but it ain't about a government of action that fights for working families. It ain't about opposing imperialism. It's just a collection of very negative, hateful people. And if you want to know why, I'll tell you, right? When I mentioned earlier that the Uhuru movement, right? The Uhuru movement, Penny Hess, Jesse Neville, and Amalia Shatella, three leaders of an African-American communist group, they were arrested and charged with being agents of Russia, dragged into federal court. And the communists didn't do anything to support them. One of their own, right? The African People's Socialist Party has been around since the 80s. This communist group, it's been around. They have the Burning Spear newspaper. In St. Petersburg, Florida, they have a big building. In St. Louis, Missouri, they have a big building. They got arrested, and they didn't charge them with selling drugs. They didn't charge them with robbing people or plotting violent revolution. They charged them with their speech, with saying that Russia was right in Ukraine. And they said that by saying that, they were acting as foreign lobbyists. And they didn't even frame them up, right? You know, the communists rallied in support of Mumia Abu-Jamal, who was framed for murder, right? But they at least charged Mumia with murder, right? The communists rallied to support Leonard Peltier. He was framed for murder. He was at least charged with murder. They didn't even make up a fake crime that the Uhuru movement had been charged with. They didn't make up a fake crime. They just turned their free speech into a crime. And they said it's illegal to say Russia's right in Ukraine, because if you say that, you're acting as a foreign agent, a foreign lobbyist, and we have the right to throw you in jail. And these communist groups didn't do anything to support the Uhuru movement. Anything. Nothing. They did nothing. They published a little article in their magazine. Oh, we're against it. They made a tweet. That's my favorite, right? Certain people, certain organizations that sprung up out of nowhere, that have huge budgets, that, you know, people are leading it, that come from millionaire families and all of that. They didn't do anything to support the Uhuru movement, but they tweeted about it once. And they think that matters. You know, they didn't do anything to support the Uhuru movement. Tucker Carlson did long interviews with Chairman O'Malley. Tucker Carlson's a Republican. He supported the Uhuru movement, right? Glenn Beck did stories highlighting the Uhuru case. All kinds of people that were not leftists spoke up for the Uhuru movement, but the communist groups didn't do shit for the Uhuru movement. If that right there doesn't tell you that the communist groups are absolutely worthless, I don't know what to tell you, right? If you can't stick up for the Uhuru movement, what value do you have? If the government comes for one of your own and says that preaching anti-imperialism is a crime, and your response, is to, oh, well, we wrote an article about it on our website. I mean, yeah, we at CPI, we made it our effort to do as much as we possibly could to support them. We raised their case and we arranged for UN press conferences. I'll tell you this, we organized a UN press conference about the Uhuru case, and we invited some other communists to it, and they didn't mention the Uhuru case in their remarks. They didn't say anything about it. Unbelievable. The whole press conference was supposed to be about the Uhuru case, but these jackasses are just so important. We raised their case at the United Nations. We raised their case in Russia. We raised their case in many different places. We did everything we could. We made like short films about the case. We did everything we could to support the Uhuru 3. And these communists didn't do anything for them. And there are people who don't understand why that matters. And that is beyond me. When people don't understand why that matters. And it's one thing for the communist groups to have acted so badly. But there are people, probably people listening right now as I say this, that don't think that even matters. That are just like, yeah, so what? I do not understand it, right? That and at this point, why be a communist? Right? If communists can't even defend their own against the feds, against the feds arresting them for their speech. Why be a communist? What is there to gain from being a communist, right? Communists don't want a government of action that fights for working families. Communists are overwhelmingly not anti-imperialist. The number of communists in America that actually stand with Russia and China and are actually anti-imperialist is very small. And even they couldn't even stand with the Uhuru movement. So we are doing something new. But why are they like this? And this is the important thing. Why are communists? Why wouldn't they stand with the Uhuru movement? Why wouldn't they stand with them? Because of that satanic mindset, because of the red flag, because they're jealous. Look, I kid you not, I will never forget this. There was one young man who told me that the Uhuru movement had been arrested by the FBI because the FBI wanted to make them famous, wanted them to be more famous and get more attention and help them raise money. And I looked at that and I thought, what a fucking stupid thing to say. The feds can help people raise money and they can support them, not by arresting them. You don't raid people's homes and drag them into federal court. You don't make them spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on their legal defense. But they're jealous. He was just jealous, right? He's some loser, some bottom feeder. And he's like, why aren't people retweeting me? Oh, look, people are watching the Uhuru movement. Oh, I bet they just arrested them to help them raise money. Because he's thinking like a communist. He's jealous, right? It's unbelievable, right? All these communists are all they care about is how famous they can be on the internet and how much attention they can get, right? I'll tell you one thing communists never do. Never, right? Is if somebody goes out and accomplishes something for a cause they believe in, they never get up and say, good job, great. Communists say they support Palestine, but if another communist group does something for Palestine, they don't go, oh, wow, they did something great for Palestine. No, right? Communists never will they ever be team players. It's all about them. They have a Che Guevara fantasy in their head. They're the main character. They're the hero in the action movie. And if anybody else accomplishes anything or gets any more attention, it's just somehow it's all a big conspiracy against them. It is the most disgusting thing I have ever seen. It really is. It really is. The more you accomplish for the causes that so-called communists believe in, the more they hate you. The more they hate you, right? I mean, that's just the reality of the situation, right? They don't respect you more if you do more for the causes they believe in. They're more jealous of you because their ideology is based on jealousy, right? Look, I have spent my entire life trying to explain to people what Marxist economics actually is. Everyone in America believes that communist ideology is that, we think some people have more money than others, and it's no fair. And it's just unfair that some people have more money than others. And so we're throwing a baby tantrum about it. It's no fair, and we want to divide up the money equally. I spent my whole life explaining that's not what it is. We actually want a rationally planned economy where the banks, factories, and industries are organized to serve public good and not the profits of a wealthy few. We're not trying to get rid of inequality. We're trying to get rid of a system where abundance creates poverty. We want to unleash the productive forces. But communists don't want to hear that. Why would you become a communist if you didn't want everyone to be equal, if you didn't believe in the caricature of communism that we're all given? And that's what they all are. And that's why they love Luigi Mangione, right? He killed somebody. Somebody was rich and other people were not having health care, so they got killed. I want to kill people. Yeah, I love killing people. Who cares if you actually get the health care for anybody? Who cares if things get better, right? Somebody suffered. They got to see somebody get taken down. It's a negative wrecker mindset. That's what communism is. And that's why they couldn't stand with the Uhuru movement. They couldn't stand with the Uhuru movement. Why? Well, they're getting attention, not me, right? They're getting attention, right? Even though they faced 15 years in prison. Oh, they're getting attention, not me, right? That's why, these communist groups that I was in front of the federal courthouse. Charles Barron, former U.S. congressman, former New York City Council member. He was there. Jill Stein was there. Were any of these communist groups there? Nope. No, they were not. No, they were not. The Communist Party USA was not in front of that federal courthouse. PSL was not in front of that federal courthouse. None of them were there in front of the federal courthouse with the Uhuru movement. Why would they do that? That would get more attention for the Uhuru movement. It wouldn't make them the main character, right? I mean, unfortunately, in America, we have been told from the time we were children that communism is evil. And so in America, people become communists because they want to be evil. And that's what we've got. We've got a movement of evil people, a movement of evil people who can't support one of their own, who can't even support one of their own when the feds come for them. I mean, and that's the situation. I don't want to build a movement of people who want to be evil. I want to build a movement to rescue my country from the nightmare of globalism, imperialism. I want to build a movement to stop the danger of a new world war, to stop the march toward World War III. I want to build a movement that opposes the attacks on our civil liberties and fights for working families. I want to build a movement for a government that invests in the population. That's what I want. And communists don't want that. So I'm not a communist anymore, right? And, you know, it's that simple. And I'll tell you, there are loads of people who their communist group didn't do anything for Uhuru. They're fine with that. And their communist group, you know, didn't do anything to stand. They're fine with that. But when I said I wasn't a communist anymore, what? And that just right there tells you how stupid they are. They don't care what position I take on actual reality. Look, they don't care. They just care about the label, right? It's an identity. I can be a communist. And really, in America, when people call themselves communists, what they're basically saying is, I'm against the country I live in. They think that the society they live in is bad and wrong, and they want everyone to know that they're against it. And you don't build a real movement by being against the country you're in. And that's why they have a meltdown against American flags. That's why they're so anti-religious. And there is a whole new world outside of the West that emerged because of communism, but has matured beyond that, right? In China, they're not doing the Cultural Revolution thing. The Mao era is over, but it's the foundation, right? Russia, the Soviet Union fell. They had the 90s. Putin's in power. They're very proud of what the Soviet Union accomplished, industrializing the country, defeating the Nazis, inventing space travel, but they're doing something new and different. I mean, and Ibrahim Traore and Burkina Faso and the Islamic Revolution of Iran and Bolivarianism. And there are many amazing anti-imperialist, pro-growth, pro-working families movements in this world. Well, they're not doing the communism thing. They've gotten beyond that. And, you know, if you want to tell me, if you want to convince me, I'm curious. If anyone wants to convince me why I should still be a communist, why I should still be a communist, please come on here. Please come on this stream and tell me. Please come on this stream and tell me. I will invite you on. You know what? I might be making a huge mistake here, but I don't care. If you think I'm making a mistake by not being a communist anymore, you come on here and you tell me. You join the stream and you can tell me why you think I should be part of a movement that can't even defend one of their own. Right? You tell me why. Why should I do that? Right? If you want to debate me on this point, come on, bring it on, because I am so tired of this, right? I want to oppose imperialism. I want to fight for working families. I love my country. I love working people. I think about the people in the small town I grew up in, about the number of people I went to high school with who've died from opioids. I think about how our freedoms are being taken away, how Scott Ritter had his home raided by the FBI. I think about all of this, right? And it just says to me, look, we have to build a serious movement, and communism is the private property of some evil people that won't let it be a serious movement, right? And you know, it is private property of some evil people. So yeah, if you want to donate, you can support me that way. Caleb Moppin 22 on Cash App or Rumble Rant. But yeah, they won't let me send super chats anymore. But yeah, if you want to join the stream and tell me why, debate me on this point, bring it on. Bring it on. Tell me why. Tell me why I should still be a communist. Why should I be a communist when the communists can't even stand with the Uhuru movement? When the global anti-imperialist movement is not? There is something satanic. There is something satanic in communism, right? They were trying to overthrow feudalism. In the process of overthrowing feudalism, they appealed to people's vengeful desire, their libidinal, Oedipal desires. And we have to move toward a new stage of anti-imperialism. I am in this to build a movement. Let me emphasize this. I am in this to build a movement, and I am so tired of people that are in this to be famous on the internet, right? I am so tired of that. People that are in this to be famous on the internet. It doesn't matter, right? It's not about being famous on the internet, right? It's either, it's like, it's so sad. I deal with two types of people, right? People that are more famous than me on the internet, that are, afraid to boost me, afraid to associate with me because it might hurt their clout, or people that are less famous than me on the internet and are angry with me and jealous of me, that think it's my fault that I can't make them more famous. It's so sad. Social media has fucked with people's minds. It is totally fucked with people's minds. People aren't concerned about actually changing the world anymore. They just want to win the social media battle. They want to get all the likes and all the shares, and they don't understand that it's about building a real movement. And I'm not blocking anybody. And that's the other thing I don't understand. CPI, we are constantly appealing to people's desire. If you want to write something, if you want to write, we'll help you write. If you want to give a speech or make a video, we'll help you do it. We're not blocking you. We're not suppressing people. We're trying to help people find their creative power. But people want the creative. They want the glory. They want the attention. They want to have a big social media following, but they don't want to do the work. Right? They don't want to do the work, or they don't want to, do the work in a way that relates to what the group does. And they just think it'll just magically spring up. That's not how history works. When we talk about main character syndrome, we talk about the egos and all this stuff. I mean, anyway, this isn't what you all want to hear, right? I'm sorry. This isn't what you all want to hear. And you've heard this all from me before, but I have to get on here and justify it over and over again. I am an anti-imperialist. I stand with Venezuela. I stand with Cuba. I stand with Iran. I stand with Russia. I stand with China. I stand with working families of America. And I say our real enemy is at home. Our real enemy is the big bankers and the international monopolies that are looting our country. And we need to build a movement of working people to demand a government of action that fights for working families. And I wrote a whole book explaining the Houthi movement in Yemen and where they came from, a religious movement fighting for the working families of Yemen, fighting against austerity. And I'm committed to this, and I am frustrated because the people who in theory are supposed to believe in this don't. They don't, right? And they just, they don't believe in it. So anyhow, and that has led me to spiritually mature, right? Communism, the foundation is dialectical materialism, the belief that all that exists is matter. There is no spiritual force. There is no God. There's no, higher power. All that exists is matter, but that matter is constantly in a state of motion. It is through clashing and contradiction and conflict and the motion that history moves forward. That's the dialectical materialist philosophy. Dialectical materialism, I have concluded, is not correct because how you think affects the world. I am so thankful that somebody, shout out to the person who did it, turned me on to the work of Wallace Wattles, because Wallace Wattles was a socialist. He was a good friend of Eugene Debs. He ran for office as a socialist, and he wrote a number of books about Christianity and communism. He wrote 2 books, The New Christ and Jesus, the Man and His Works. Go and read them. It's about why Jesus incarnates the principles of socialism and communism. On top of that, Wallace Wattles wrote The Science of Being Great, The Science of Getting Rich, How to Promote Yourself, The Science of Being Healthy. And all of what Wallace Wattles wrote was about how the way you think and the way you see the world affects the world around you. With your thoughts, And the way you perceive things, the way you interact with things, you get what you expect. You have to learn to think in a certain way. You have to learn to expect the best from the world. You have to learn to not be competitive, but rather to be creative. You have to celebrate your human desire to change the world around you. A thought is a real thing. Let me tell you that. A thought is a real thing. A thought is a real thing. If you think something, it's real. And it affects the world around you. A thought is a real thing. And you have to work very, very hard to train yourself to think in a certain way where you expect the best from the world. You want to blossom and grow. You're not competitive. You're not afraid and panicking. And I mean, there's a certain way of thinking. And Eugene Debs, to his credit, thought this way. If you read Wallace Wattles, he wrote about how Eugene Debs incarnated this way of being. The great socialist leader, Eugene Debs, who built a mass socialist movement in this country before World War I, he very much gave expression to this way of being, right? The new thought. And I have evolved from dialectical materialism to the new thought. And I've realized that my faith in God and that my ability to keep building an organization and to keep going on this road, despite so much negativity existing in our culture. There's so much negativity in our culture, but the way to get past it is you have to train yourself to think in a certain way. You have to learn to expect the best from the world, right? And that, this new thought stuff, obviously it kept going in the aftermath of the death of Wallace Wattles. It kept going. And, Donald Trump is very heavily influenced by the new thought, right? He went to the church of Norman Vincent Peale when he was a kid. His current pastor is Paula White Cain. She's also into this new thought. They interpret it in their own kind of way, right? They don't, they have a very different perspective than Wallace Wattles. They're obviously not socialists, but they have been successful as people because they very much tap into this new thought, this new way of being, right? And that you need to change your attitude. We are being trained by our culture to be pessimistic, to be negative, to be competitive, to be jealous. We have been trained by our culture to be that way. And nobody is more like that than the communists. They understand certain things. Like, if you really get into the communist philosophy, there's a lot of really important things there. I'm very thankful for the fact that when the great financial crisis of 2008 hit, I was given a Marxist education about why, right? And I learned, I will never forget, and this is why it's wild. People have different sides, right? And the man who wrote this book, he died, right? He's deceased, Fred Goldstein. He wrote this book. And Fred, not my favorite person in a lot of ways, but I'm really thankful that I ran into him. And I'm really thankful for another person whose name shall not be mentioned because he probably hates my guts now, who also taught me a huge amount. But when the 2008 financial crisis hit, I wanted to know why. And this book was published, Low-Wage Capitalism, What the New Globalized High-Tech Imperialism Means for the Class Struggle in the U.S. This book is free on the internet. You can find it. Go read it. Another book that I read and learned a huge amount from, by Nelson Peary, The Future is Up to Us, A Revolutionary Talking Politics with the American People. Go and read this book. I learned a lot from it. Right? Go read this book. This book has been published in the 80s. It's by Sam Marcy, High Tech, Low Pay, a Marxist analysis of the changing character of the working class. Go read this book. You'll learn a lot from it. And if you read those books, they will give you an understanding of why the 2008 financial crisis happened. Why did the 2008 financial crisis happen? Why? It happened because we have an irrational economic system. It happened because self-driving cars should be a good thing, but we live in a system where self-driving cars would lead to mass poverty. The 2008 financial crisis happened because computer technology is advancing and it is easier than ever to create products. It is easier than ever to build things. And we don't have a rational system. We have an irrational system where the easier it is to produce things, the poorer everyone gets. And that is not rational. And it points to the need for society to control the economy in order to unleash the productive forces. And the road to equality, and this is the most important thing, you can't have equality in poverty. As long as there is scarcity, some people will have and some people will have not. The road to equality is abundance. When there's enough to go around, everyone's pretty much equal. When there's enough to go around, there's no need to regulate. People can just take what they need. No one's going to hoard. The road to equality is abundance. The road to freedom is abundance. Why do we have freedom? Right? Why did no one ever talk about the rights of man or free speech or freedom of religion until like the 1400s in Europe? Why? It was because there had never been a society that had reached the level of abundance to facilitate that kind of freedom. People aren't evil in feudalism. People weren't evil in ancient Egypt and ancient Rome. It was just we had not developed an economic level that could facilitate the instability that comes with letting people think whatever they want and say whatever they want. That the road to freedom is abundance, and the road to equality is abundance. And that the problem with capitalism is that in the capitalist system, there's a problem that never existed before ever in human history. And that is the problem of poverty created by abundance, poverty amid plenty. That has never happened before. In all the systems before capitalism, when people were homeless, it was because there wasn't enough housing. In all the systems before capitalism, when people were hungry, it was because there wasn't enough food. But capitalism is the new system that creates what they call glut, G-L-U-T, glut, which causes a situation where people become homeless, not because there's not enough housing, but because there is too much housing. People become hungry because there is too much food. In fact, go to Springfield, Missouri. Member of our organization, Penny, she just did a great video on it. In Springfield, Missouri, there's a cave with billions of dollars worth of cheese in it. Why? Because the U.S. government buys cheese in bulk from dairy farmers and buries it in a cave to keep the price of dairy high enough that the agricultural sector of the U.S. economy doesn't collapse. There is a glut of dairy. There's a glut of milk, right? We're producing a huge amount of dairy, and that should be a great thing. But the government is constantly having to buy huge amounts of it just to prevent that from leading to a crisis of overproduction, a value crisis, a glut. Right? This has never existed before. And what causes the glut is that the productive capacity of humanity has outstripped the narrow limits of the profit system. Our ability to produce and create, our creative ability as human beings, is far beyond what a system based on profit, where profit is in command, will allow for. Right? And this is what you read. Go read go read Socialism, Utopian, and Scientific by Frederick Engels. Read chapter 3. It is all about this point. It's a 3-chapter book, one of the most important books in the history of Marxism by Frederick Engels. And this is what it's about. Chapter 3 is all about this point, that human beings are constantly reinventing our relationship with nature, and we are constantly going to higher modes of production. We are constantly developing more efficient ways of utilizing natural resources to expand our population, to increase our life expectancy, to have a more comfortable life. And as we reinvent our relationship with nature, we then reinvent our economic and political system. And we're constantly moving to a higher economic and political system. And that right now, the world is constipated because we have outstripped the capitalist mode of production organized for profit. We have outstripped it. And we've got to have a system where production is rationally organized, and a big chunk of the world does. China does. There's plenty of free market stuff in China, but at the end of the day, profits are not in command. The Communist Party is. They have 5-year plans. They got state-run banks. They got state-run industries, and even private companies or do what the party says. And that's why they just keep growing. They don't have gluts on the market, because if they do, the party steps in and says, nope, nope, no, and it's fixed. Right. And that this new economy that's rising in the world, where they have states, governments that manage the economy, utilizing the innovation of the market sector, utilizing creativity and people's drive to start their own business, micro entrepreneurship, but as part of an overall state plan to increase productive forces. They're growing, and they invest in people as a source of wealth. Human beings are the source of wealth. Value comes from human labor. Human labor is the source of all wealth. Human labor and natural resources are the source of all wealth. And the leaders of the West, they think the opposite. They think the problem in the world is overpopulation, that there are too many people. That's what they believe. There are too many people in the world, and we have limited resources, finite resources, blah, 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 and they want to reduce the population. They want to get rid of human beings. Whereas if you go to Russia, they're encouraging people to build. They're encouraging people to construct. They want people to build. They want people to construct. That's what they want. And building is what it's all about. So I'm here to tell you all that we need to construct, we need to build, and it's time to get beyond our limits. Now, there's a couple things going on here. Let's see where we're at here. Let's see where we're at here. There's a lot of things we can talk about tonight. Look, I'm excited about what's going on in the world right now. I am excited about the fact that the war in Ukraine, might come to an end. It needs to come to an end. I'm excited about the fact that the United States and Iran are negotiating. I think that's a very good thing. I think it's a great thing that the United States and Iran are negotiating. And Biden said he was going to do that, and he has never done it. He's never done it. So, I'd like that. I think Trump needs to apologize for murdering Qasem Soleimani. That was a cowardly thing that Trump did, and he did it because he was getting bad advice from some people that are now not in his administration. Mike Pompeo, John Bolton, they've been stripped of their security clearances. But anyway, all right. So there's somebody who jumped in who wants to talk to me about China destroying their economy. So he is showing his face, right? And that's the first rule. You got to show your face. But, this can end at any point. So let's keep it civil. Hey, what's happening? How you doing?
Hey, doing good. Heard you talking about China a little bit, and I think I have some disagreements.
Okay.
So one thing, their economy isn't actually growing. China does very strange things to inflate their GDP numbers, and a lot of it has to do with corruption. Since the very beginning of the Chinese Communist Party, especially under Mao Zedong, they have really, really tried to basically make as much money for the party as possible.
Okay, well, I'm going to stop you right there, right? So I just want to talk about the first thing you just said there. You said their economy is not really growing. Now, you do realize right before the pandemic, the global tourism industry was having a boom because thousands and thousands of people who had never been going on vacation internationally were going on vacation. You do realize there's like whole sections of Tibet that have just gotten electrified. You do realize that there's big chunks of the country that are getting paved roads for the first time. I mean, that's not happening. That's all just propaganda. Tibet. They're all just living in starving conditions. They haven't lifted 800 million people from poverty.
Well, that's Tibet, not technically China.
Well, Tibet is part of China.
Well, yeah, China would say that.
Well, no, Tibetans would say that too. They were the most enthusiastic supporters of the revolution. Have you ever read When the Slaves Rose Up in Tibet by Anna Louise Strong? Have you read what was written by the great African-American scholar W.E.B. Du Bois? I mean, the atrocities committed against Tibetan monks were carried out by Tibetans who were rising up from serfdom. They were the ones doing it because it was Tibetan feudalism that was propped up by the Buddhist, monks. That was what was oppressing them.
I'm familiar with some of the atrocities with Tibetan feudalism and what's his name, the child kisser.
Right.
Him and his whole class are absolute scumbags, and basically it's a whole racket to just steal money from people. I'm aware of that, but you're kind of getting into like weird issues when you consider Tibet to technically be part of China. I know China does own Tibet at this point, but it's kind of like saying the British Empire's wealth is increasing because Rhodesia is increasing in economic prosperity.
Yeah, well, okay. Do you know the history of what the British colonizers did in Africa? Like, I mean, you know that whole history of, you look at what the British Empire did to Africa, and you're seriously going to compare that to what China did in Tibet?
Well, it's not that I'm comparing the two. It's just that I'm saying the point that just because Tibet is increasing in economic prosperity, that doesn't mean China is increasing in economic prosperity. Well, you can say that of Tibet, but to say that of China,
part of China. I mean, just look at a map. I mean, it's the Tibet autonomous region. It's just, we have, North Dakota is part of America. Tibet is part of China.
Right, but it's kind of like saying, well, like Britain is increasing in economic prosperity because Rhodesia has increased economic prosperity.
Yeah, but Rhodesia is on the other side of the planet. It would be like saying Scotland is increasing in economic prosperity because Scotland is in Britain and Tibet is in China.
Well, it's the same point. Like it's a territory that was owned by the British. So you're
yeah, but it's on the other side of the planet. It was seized in brutal colonialism, whereas China is something that goes back for thousands of years. I mean, there has been, and the only reason that it was divided was because of the British and because of colonialism. I mean, Hong Kong is part of China, Taiwan is part of China, the Uyghur regions are part of China. There's one China. I just, I think that's U.S. government policy.
Well, sure, but even ignoring that, that's only like one territory. So,
but I'm talking about. It's not just Tibet; it's the Uyghur regions. It's all over the country. Millions of people have been lifted up from poverty. I mean, they have been raising. I don't disagree. Millions of people here.
I don't disagree with that assessment of Tibet.
So how can you say they're not growing? Then your premise is that they're not growing.
Well, here's the thing. I think you'd agree with me on this. I think there is a problem in most Western developed nations. United States is one of the more egregious cases. The UK is particularly bad. We have a situation where there's not actually much real economic productivity. And you're seeing these kind of games played where wealth is being taken out of the middle class and it's being funneled up to the rich. Property values are probably the best example of this, especially in the UK. They're not really building many new houses. There's not much new construction going on. There's not much more employment. There's not any actual productive economic activity, but they've rigged a system in a way where there's like a speculator market, and that's being counted into some of these GDP figures. But the only people who are actually benefiting from it are the ultra wealthy. So you can see GDP go up, but no one's really actually benefiting from it.
Yeah, life expectancy is going down. So et cetera. Yeah, I'm with you on that much, but I think we're seeing the opposite in China. Life expectancy is going up.
Well, by the way, life expectancy in China and Russia and all these communist countries have gone up after they moved away from communism.
No, actually, in the 90s, Russia's life expectancy significantly dropped, and things only got better in the 90s when Putin put oil and gas under state ownership and re-centralized the economy. The 90s in Russia, go read The Shock Doctrine by Naomi Klein.
So right after the collapse of the Soviet Union, life expectancy skyrocketed.
That's a lot. That is not true at all, my friend. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, there was a huge plummet. I mean, the suicide rate went through the roof. Mass poverty was everywhere. They lost 10% of their population, either left the country or died. Andre Gunder Frank, the U.S. economy U.S. economist, he called it economic genocide. I mean, that is not true at all. I mean, that is the fall of the Soviet Union was devastating. And in fact, even the anti-communists argue that. They just blame it on the communists. They say, well, somehow the fall of communism was the communists' fault. But no, you are just way off on that point, my friend. I mean, no, the fall of the Soviet Union was an absolute economic disaster. I mean, just ask any economist. There's BBC documentaries you can watch, etc. You know, that's just simply not the case. I mean, where did you get that from?
I'm pretty sure that was from World Health Organization.
The World Health Organization talks about what a disaster it was that their healthcare system fell apart. I mean, you know, that like something like 90,000 factories closed down. You had mass unemployment at a point you'd never had. The drug, crisis in the country exploded. The suicide rate went through the roof. I mean, the 90s, even in like your standard anti-Putin documentary, they acknowledge this. They say the reason Putin came to power was to fix the disaster during the Yeltsin years. I mean, it was just devastating what happened to the country. So you're just way off on that point. That's what we're all taught, though, and that's what I was taught. See, that's why I got into all of this to begin with, because I was taught communism just failed everywhere it's ever been tried, and then I learned that
period. There was a
I'm talking about a 10-year period. I'm talking about from 1991, and then you had 1993, you had Black September, and then had 1996, you had the election that the U.S. government, basically rigged for Boris Yeltsin, and it wasn't really until 1999 that things started to improve with Putin, and he wasn't really able to start really dramatically fixing it until the oil prices went up in 2003, because he had centered it around Gazprom and Rosneft. But yeah, there was 10 years of what they called economic genocide.
Regardless, it was kind of off topic to the point I was making. I'll just concede that point.
There's somebody else behind you, so make your point quickly. But
yeah, sure. So you can have increased economic prosperity within certain regions of a country or within certain economic classes. That doesn't actually mean the wealth of the overall country is improving. That's basically what's happening in China.
Well, actually, it's not. Even the most rural areas are getting roads paved. They're paving roads in the most rural parts of China. They're unpaving roads across America. So, I mean, that's actually in America, we're seeing, the heartland is just coming apart, and, we're basically fleeing to the coasts. I'm from Ohio. I fled to New York City to find economic prosperity. Most of the people I went to school with, they've done that because there's nothing left in the Midwest. That's America you're describing, right? But in China, it's these rural areas that are building and constructing and getting electrified, and that's just not accurate.
There's a lot to say about that. For one thing, a lot of these construction projects in China are below their own codes. There was an earthquake that happened, in like the mid 2000s, something like 80,000 people died. And it's because
according to who?
According
to who? I mean, who gave that number? Is that a Chinese government number? Is that just what some anti-China blog said? Or, I mean, it's because there's a lot of stuff. I mean, they told us the Uyghurs were all being rounded up and put in death camps, and it was the Holocaust, and that turned out not to be true. I mean, there's just a lot of disinformation. There's an anti-China industry, the Falun Gong, Epoch Times. They just make stuff up. They're harvesting their organs.
Okay,
they've said that a million times.
Do you believe the Tiananmen Square massacre happened?
I believe there was a lot of death that happened during 1989 during those events, but there was shooting on both sides. There were hundreds of Chinese soldiers that were killed also. And it was an awful event that, but it was an attempted color revolution, and the students dispersed peacefully, and outside the square there was an episode of blood and killing that was very ugly that went on for a couple weeks. And there were sections of the Chinese military that were fighting other sections of the Chinese military. It was awful, but there wasn't a color revolution. So,
but the point I'm making is, like, when you look at some of these infrastructure projects, I will agree China has put in more effort into producing more public infrastructure, but the actual usefulness and safety of that infrastructure is very questionable. And there's a lot of corruption within the Chinese Communist Party. Recently, they've tried to root out that corruption. They're actually committing killings They're like killing some heads of state because
Yeah, they've been
they're,
using
like,
it's an anti-corruption campaign with Xi Jinping.
Yeah.
with, with the
They're also doing that
mastermind
within the
campaign. But listen,
military.
Garland's next, but it's been good, so I'm gonna bring Garland on. But thanks. All right, all right, Garland, how you doing?
Hey, I just want to let you know this is the guy you were debating.
Okay, all right, and I love people. Don't you love people? That's great. All right, it's a fake Garland, right? Right. Look at that. Right. Don't you love that? That was like the ultimate trolling. There's a fake Garland. That was cute. Called it. Yeah, right. So they had like an image of Garland to like get me in. That's what they did. So, oh boy. Who knows? What a night. What a night. Thanks for playing. I know this guy. All right. Are you fake? Are you gonna pull your face away and have a dildo? Or I'm just kidding. All right, come on. How you doing? How you doing?
I thought this was a family show, man.
I know, seriously. What's happening here? What's happening?
It's kind of interesting what he was talking about. He was talking about the proliferation of, I believe Graeber called it the bullshit jobs.
Mm-hmm.
Like because currently I'm trying to find me another job. Like, because and a lot of the jobs that are out, they're kind of obsolete. I'm not going to say obsolete yet, but it's not like so much about like trying to something concrete like healthcare, manufacturing. It's more so, can you tick a box? And somehow this requires experience, I guess.
Well, there's actually when it comes to the bullshit jobs, a lot of them are in the nonprofit sector, and they're like a bribe. You know what I mean? It's almost like, if you can get your degree in the humanities, right, in political science and sociology and philosophy, you can get one of those jobs, but you have to be completely politically conforming. Right. And those jobs, it's money that's pumped from like Rockefeller foundations and the Ford Foundation. It's like the richest of the rich pump money into these foundations. And those jobs are there to like kind of police people that ask political questions. It's like you can have a job working in social justice. Right. There's a million of these places in New York City, and you can have a job working in social justice where you don't have to do that much work.
I assume you're opposite the People's Forum are that.
Well, they're a little bit different because they pretend to be anti-imperialist. You know what I mean? But it's a form of that.
Anti-imperialists might behind.
Right. Exactly.
Who can afford what nonprofit can afford New York real estate?
Yeah, on 38th Street. I mean, it's ridiculous, but they're a little bit unique in that they give a voice to, I mean, they're not as bad as some of these, but like there's a lot of people who work for Planned Parenthood in New York City, for example, right? Planned Parenthood.
But they're not but they're not working at the clinic. They're not doing the abortions.
They work in an office and they like design the website, or they like write papers applying for grants for a clinic in Nebraska or something like that. And they don't do that much work, but they are very heavily policed in what they believe. Right. And there's a lot of places like this, right, that are just kind of liberal NGOs, labor unions.
Being a pro box ticker.
And you can work there and be a social justice employee, but you have to, that's where they really control those folks, where if anything got out that you were supporting Russia or whatever, you're out of a job very quickly. I first encountered these people. I remember when I was at the U.S. Social Forum, like right after Obama got elected, or right before Obama got elected, they had a U.S. Social Forum in Georgia, and I went to it. And then they had another one in Detroit, and I also went to that. And all the communist groups were there, but there were all these people there that weren't with any communist group. They were all just kind of like middle-class young people that worked at one of these foundations, right? And I remember that, and a lot of them were anarchists, which I thought was interesting. It was like but I'd be like, you're actually just a Democrat, They work for a Democrat foundation, but they're like, well, I'm an anarchist. I'm so much more radical, and I go to punk shows. It's like, yeah, but your job is you're a Democrat. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's like a weird straight line between being an anarchist and being a lib, because because I'm going to say this. This is related to some discourse that happened around that movie that won on the Oscar, the actress in it is gorgeous, blah blah blah. But the same people who were defending like the whole blank work thing, they were basically citing like a bunch of different NGOs and Soros ops. But these people had like the black flag in their bio. They're fakes.
Yeah, well, I noticed that during Occupy Wall Street. There was like this weird like anarchism and Rachel Maddow liberalism like walked hand in hand. It was like you could be both. You couldn't be a real, anti-imperialist though. That wasn't compatible, but you could be I mean, you
can, but you kind of just have to do a clown. But you kind of have to do a clown show where you just try and be as alienating as possible. It's weird catch-22.
Well, and then BreadTube really solidified it. Like BreadTube was the ultimate expression, right? When I wrote the BreadTube book, I started like examining like what Vosh was promoting, what ThoughtSlime was promoting. And basically for them, being an anarcho-communist just means that you start a business under capitalism in which the employees are shareholders.
Trust me when I say, I really don't know how much trouble I'm going to get in for saying this, but you know what, these people, but you know what, I kind of don't have much regard for this place. I work at a freaking co-op, and it's like run by a bunch of these freaking anarchist types, and my job is to wash dishes in their deli. No, this is nothing against the people there, but you're never going to believe what I saw being pushed there. It was a freaking donate to Ukraine fundraiser.
Of course.
AKA Das Übermenschen.
Yeah, that works perfectly. That fits exactly. And, I wrote BreadTube Serves Imperialism, and most of the book was about what they believe. None of them complained about anything but the first chapter because they were all just excited about their various Vosh and all they cared about was their favorite commentators. But what they actually believe is that you can't build socialism with, quote, the government, right? We're not for state socialism. You just have to start a business, and that business is a cooperative. And it's there's nothing at all revolutionary about that. And I've seen the debates where the Jacobin people get up at these events. And full
disclosure, those places are just as full of the freaking bureaucratic bullshit. I ran my work situation through an AI, and it said I was living in a fucking Boots Riley movie.
Well, I mean, they debate, conservatives, Ben Shapiro, and he says that's allowed under capitalism. If you want to start a cooperative business, you're allowed, and I mean, it's like there's no, they're not demanding anything that's not incompatible with full on libertarian neoliberal capitalism,
And that's another interesting trend I'm noticing. It seems like there is a rise in alternative figures. I think Fuentes is an unstable prototype. The Manosphere comes to mind. These people are like dissident right-wing figures, but I've got my own theories about them. All I'll say is, one, observe how they glaze. They like praise to death. Oh, Dubai is safe. The Gulf states are safe. They don't have crime. They're perfect. The women are covered and whatnot. And they're pro-Palestine. I've never heard any of them say anything good about Iran, which is intriguing. Because
I mean, it is.
I'm not going to say what I think, but you kind of get what I'm laying down.
Well, the pro-Palestine thing, I will say, it was the first time since Trump took office, that the left was actually at odds with the mainstream media and with imperialism. And I was like, oh, this is good. And then I went to the rallies and I was just like, oh, maybe this isn't good, because it was their faces are covered. They're giving the middle finger. They're burning the American flag. It's like the message of the rallies was basically a giant, I hate you, to everyone walking by, it was just, and it was just a giant, and, the signs are all about like white settler, go colonial. Yeah, I mean, it was just like.
And then you have the other side of the argument, which is a lot of weird stuff I'm not going to get into. I think there's a lot of weird. All I'm saying is, it seems like the Palestine discourse, I think, has changed a lot since the last time it happened. Because you have
but the Zionists and the pro-Palestine people basically had the same message, which is that the Palestinians are America's enemy. And that's what I got from the rally. Like the Palestinian, and we went out there. The basic message was money for jobs, not for war. Build schools and hospitals in America, not this foreign country, Israel, right? And you know, America first. But you couldn't say that. No, it was like they were working for Israel, right? Israel wanted, and they were at some point, PSL, the People's Forum, that's who controls the People's Forum. They were in New York City, literally blocking people from getting to work, right? So working class people are trying to get to work, and they're blocking them from getting to work.
Go on a field trip to the fricking factory or the Pentagon.
Yeah, and it was just it was like the rallies were being organized in such a way. It was like helping Israel reinforce in people's minds the Palestinians are your enemies. It was done very poorly, and I guess on the one hand, I'm happy that there was at least enough people that were outraged by what Israel was doing. That's good, right? And so, you know, but then to see them manipulated that way was very unfortunate. And you know, and to see them just to, you know, but it's based on this kind of, and the other thing though is that, and I've said this over and over again, look, wokeism is rooted in Zionism. Okay. And that it's a little bit weird because the woke people, you know, on Palestine, they took a decent position, but the narrative that the people are the enemy, right? The masses of people are the enemy, right? You know, Karl Marx in the Communist Manifesto, what does he say? He says, all previous movements have been movements on behalf of minorities, but we are fighting for the immense majority. Right? That's what he says. But this idea that we're always looking to find like some little minority that can be oppressed so we can condemn the majority. Right? And
exactly.
It's the banality of evil. You read Hannah Arendt, right? She writes this whole book, Eichmann in Jerusalem, all about how Adolf Eichmann, this Nazi war criminal, is just a normal guy. Because deep down, normal people are all Nazi war criminals, right?
And that's the missing piece to the argument to the people I was talking about earlier. Like they'll say that the certain ethnic group is controlling black actors, and they're controlling the
careful what you say.
Exactly.
We're on YouTube, you know, and you know, we're not promoting ethnic bigotry here. We're talking about an ideology, right? We're talking about an ideology of Zionism, which is supremacism for one ethnic group. That's what we're talking about. You know, and that ideology, it has like a victim complex, and it views like all of humanity as like inherently against them, right? So therefore they need their own country. It's a lot like you know, the Borat movies. They're funny. I watched the first Borat movie. It was funny. But what's the message, right? Borat is like a caricature. It's like he's like half Russian,
and it's done by an Israeli. Let's be honest. That's the. It's like it's like that one movie. You ever see Bamboozled?
I did, yeah.
Like it's that. Okay. But instead of Michael Rappaport, it's Sacha Baron Cohen.
Okay, interesting.
Like, because he's basically having a bunch of people dress as like weird caricatures and having them perform this weird stereotype.
Yeah,
of just racism.
What it is you have this guy, and it's like a dig at Russia and at the Muslim world at the same time. He's from Kazakhstan, which is like, it's like a Muslim region, but it's part of the former USSR. And he walks around and he's like stupidly anti-Semitic, right? And it's like he's like, the Jew, you know, and it just like
I've heard of a Jewish autonomous oblast.
Yeah, he's just stupidly anti-Semitic. You know,
no, I'm saying that Russian Jews have their own region. And it's semi-autonomous.
The Soviet Union, they did, but let me finish the point. You know, and he's walking around saying, you know, saying stupidly anti-Semitic things. He comes to America, and he goes to various places, and he draws the Americans out to say bigoted things, right? And it's like the message is that deep down Americans are just the same as Muslims and Russians, and we're all just bloodthirsty Jew haters, and that's why you need Israel. Right? You need Israel so that they can get away. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what I got from the movie. Is that what you got from the movie?
That and there's the fact that this dude's Israeli just makes the whole thing feel kind of more evil. Like,
Yeah, well, I
the
mean,
fact that he's turning it into, that he's basically performing a weird song and dance for Israel, like this weird sort of minstrel show act,
yeah,
that just never sat right with me.
yeah, the whole thing, and it was, yeah, it was. So anyway, yeah, but yeah, Zionism, you know, it is very much this anti-populist ideology, and Timoshenko has it right. It's like Trump is Hitler, right? Because he's rallying the majority, and the majority are inherently bad, and we're like, you know, and that's, you know, and it's all the same ideology, right?
And that's
You
kind
look
of
at
where these,
it's
and that's kind of where those people come in. They view them, they do kind of talk a bit about what you're talking about, which is the idea that, yes, a lot of intellectuals who happen to be of a certain religious, it wasn't all
Yeah,
of
but
them
you know,
by
the
any means.
father of
Some of
this
them,
was Nietzsche, and
yeah.
Nietzsche was not Jewish, and he invented this, right? Nietzsche, philosophical irrationalism, right, where he's condemning Christianity.
And a lot of frickin', and a
Yeah.
lot of these old school, old like anarchist people will always bring up like frickin', what's the name? I want to say Bakunin or Kropotkin, like that ilk. They were pretty anti-Semitic.
Okay.
Like, and like, and I've heard a lot of people will say that they had, it was like dated because, you know, the Russian Empire was anti-Semitic, but there's there was like a lot of anti-Semitism among anarchists around that period.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah,
the
no,
idea
that
that
is
like
true.
these
Yeah, I mean,
weird anarchists,
I know Bakunin, you know, made a statement about Marx working for the Rothschilds and all of that,
yeah,
but you know, Friedrich Nietzsche, he had this philosophy of the Übermenschen, right? And how, like, you know, humanity is like oppressing the great ones. There's some people that are just superior because they can create their own reality. And that they, you know, that the universe, is it based on, you know, the argument is the universe based on order or chaos, right? The rationalist says it's based on order. There's certain rules. The irrationalist says it's based on chaos. Nietzsche is saying it's based on chaos, right? But there are certain people that are able to just kind of define reality as they choose, and they're the Übermenschen, right? And that the struggle is for the inferior ones to not hold them back, right? And that's the elitist kind of the Nietzsche worldview. Some people are just better than others, and we need to create a society where the better ones can just rise up. And he talks about how colonialism is great. He argues that it's the blonde beast because, you know, Christianity was slave morality. Christianity was the doctrine of the lowly. But through being a colonizer, the white man is learning to just be cruel and ruthless, and might makes right. And he talks about how criminals are great because they play by their own rules. They just do whatever they want. And it's this philosophy that is anti-human, right? The bulk of humanity are the enemy. But the way to be great is to just force your will onto the world and don't obey anybody. Right.
is that why that one Ayn Rand novel has that one scene?
Which one? I mean, this is all
the one
Ayn
about
Rand
the
novels.
Architect.
Right. Yeah. Right. Howard Rourke, you know, where he breaks into the apartment and rapes the woman. Right. Is that what you're talking about? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Where Howard Rourke, Howard Rourke is this great man, this architect who designs buildings the way he wants, and no one can tell him what to do. And he, you know, ends up having to work in a coal mine and all of this. And then there's this beautiful woman who's like in awe of how strong he is. And then, you know,
and that's the part where these people say, yes, growth is being held back. Yes, progress is bad. They're basically playing the freaking Nietzschean cartoon character of opposition, and that gives kind of, I wouldn't say validity, but it kind of would cause someone to go down that rabbit hole.
Yeah. Indeed. Well, we've had a couple super chats have come in while we were talking here. Somebody super chatted something about a site being exposed as a 4chan, or being exposed by 4chan as something. Can you clarify what site? The 4chan leak exposed this site as a deep state op. What site is that? Are you referring to? What site is a deep state op, Mariah? You want to clarify what site you are referring to? Wow, it's a wild night tonight between fake Garland Nixon. That was classic, right? It was like, boom, all right, go, and then that guy I'm seeing in the chat, that guy was like, he's apparently famous or something. He's like some famous.
He's like a fitness YouTuber. Like
Okay.
like Vegan Gains, that's his brand. His brand is that you can be muscular and athletic without eating meat. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a nutritionist. I'm not going to say that's right or wrong. But I mean,
So
it's
he's
kind.
somebody like that was a
But
big person
yeah,
who
like a
came
lot
in.
of these fitness YouTubers from the tens. One guy named Austin Dunham comes to mind. They try and move into this weird self-help direction.
Mhm.
This dude is a rarity because I think he's like a liberal or something, but he's
Hmm.
like one of those.
Okay,
From what
I've
I
never
saw,
heard
he
of this
was,
guy. I'm gonna have to Google him, but he just popped onto my stream randomly.
I
Like
guess
that,
so.
that is
Consider yourself
extremely weird.
honored.
Yeah. Vegan Gains, better known as Richard Burgess. He's got a page. I mean, okay, all right. And he just thought randomly, I'm going to come on Caleb's channel and debate him about China and lose epically because he did. But hey, what the heck? But yeah, that's pretty weird. This is a weird night. And then I cut him off because I thought it was real Garland and it was fake Garland. So,
It was Garland. It was
I
him
actually
with
I
the
cut it
freaking.
short. I was just like, okay, all right, that was interesting. So this is a strange night. I'll just tell you as much, right?
All right, I'll let you entertain the next one.
Well, yeah, well, there's
So,
no one behind you, but I think we will do the roll call,
all right.
and stuff. So it's been fun. All right, good times. Yeah, this is a strange night, but hey, Vegan Gains was trying to tell me there's no economic growth happening in China, and that was pretty wild. So yeah, there you go. There's my clout for the night. Yeah, I'm gonna wild time. Well, let's do the roll call here in a second. This has been strange. So some big YouTuber popped onto my channel to try and debate me about China and failed. So there we go. All right, I see roll call names and locations. Alyssa in Virginia. JDL in the Ozarks. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Mark Jones in Utica, New York. Very, very good. Good to have you with us. Rice from Adelaide, Australia. Ryan in Kansas City. Kansas City, here I come. Jenny in Cincinnati. Courtney in Virginia. Kevin in Ottawa. St. David's, Bermuda. Welcome, welcome. Jacob in Wisconsin. Chris in Salt Lake City. La La Land. David in Los Angeles. Gabby in Chicago. Joseph in Hermosa Beach, California. Morgan in Philadelphia. Timoshenko in St. Louis, Missouri. Mariah, clarify. Send me a message on Signal. What is, anyway. Ian in Yukon. Dan, innovationist radical in LA. Oklahoma City, Oklahoma City. On the road in Sydney, Australia. Mark in North Carolina. Ian in the Yukon. John McPeace in Chicago. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Good to have you with us. Good to have you with us. Good to have you with us. Good times. Good times. This is crazy. This is crazy. The problem is I'm hearing that guy is there was a that 4chan was a government operation. Okay. So I just want to Alex in Brazil. Anybody else? Names and locations. Alex in Brazil. Very, very good. Very, very good. Yeah, good times. Good times. Ian Chester in England. So I guess that guy who came on was some big shot on YouTube. And the sad thing about that. Oh, Terry, hey. Terry's out in PDX, Pacific Northwest. And Matt in Titusville. that guy, I guess he is some big YouTuber. And the thing is, I won that debate very clearly. You know, I mean, he was trying to tell me they weren't having economic growth in China, and that just didn't work. But the sad thing is, if that guy has a big audience and he weaponizes against me, it doesn't matter, right? And I've been through this before with the BreadTube crowd. I mean, there's really not much we can do about it, but you know, that's how it works. If someone's got a bigger platform, they win, right? So he's live now. All right. Well, there you go. I mean, if somebody, and that's the problem with social media, right? If somebody's got a bigger platform, they win the argument, right? You know, they win the argument because they've got a bigger platform. You know, and that's what I learned. I mean, I destroyed Vosh, I destroyed Destiny, but then you get all kinds of people tweeting at you, oh, you got epically owned. It's like, no, I didn't, but you know, whatever. He said Tibet isn't part of China. We just cited all kinds of stuff. So, well, all right. Well, interesting. I mean, it's kind of random. Why in the world did he come on my stream to say China isn't experiencing economic growth? And, you know, that whole thing was weird. But hey, what the heck? What the heck? We're not building a social media brand. We're trying to build a real movement. That's what we're doing. Right? You wanted to talk about not being a communist. Exactly. There you go. It's like, okay, rather than talk about not being a communist, come on and tell me that China is not growing economically, which is just not true. So yeah, I don't know. Wild night, folks, but I'm glad you all are here. I'm glad you're here. And, you know, it is pretty crazy. And then I cut him off for fake Garland Nixon. That was classic. When I cut him off for fake Garland Nixon, it was a guy with a dildo. That was wild. You just have to laugh. I mean, what can you do? You just got to laugh. You know what I mean? Kept moving the goalpost. Yeah. I mean, whatever. I don't know. We'll see what I end up doing with this, but you know, I'm glad I'm here, right? I'm glad I'm here. Yeah. I missed Vegan Gains. Yeah. He came on. Vegan. I didn't know who he was. I'm not YouTube savvy enough, but Vegan Gains came on here to debate me about China. I didn't know that he was some important somebody. And, and we had a debate about China, and that was amusing. So there you go. But what else is new? So I am going to answer people's questions. That's what we're going to do. It's the second half of the show. It's what we always do. So a number of Rumble rants have come in. First, John McPeace says Tulsi Gabbard has done more to stop war with Iran than 99.9% of the people claiming that she supports one. That's actually a good point, right? I mean, according to the New York Times, which is not a fan of Trump, which is not a fan of Tulsi Gabbard, for the New York Times to admit that Donald Trump prevented Israel from attacking Iran, that's called a statement against interest, folks. That's what that is. That's a statement against interest, and it very clearly, that means it happened, right? I mean, why would they be saying that? If they were pushing their agenda, they wouldn't be saying that. And you look at it, you know, Netanyahu wanted to go all in and attack Iran, and he said, you know, Trump stopped it from happening with Tulsi Gabbard. Now that's big. And right now there's negotiations happening with Iran. So I'm not saying everything Trump is doing is great. I'm saying that we're slightly better off with Trump because there's more space. There's more political space with Trump. And with that space, we need to build a real anti-imperialist movement. That's what we need to do. We need to build a real anti-imperialist movement. And so we're having a convention in Chicago, July 12th, 2025. Be there. If there's one event you come to this year, make it this one. We got a Chinese high-speed train on the cover there. Good times. Anyhow, so yes, next super chat. Hempcar says, right? Climate change, Donald Trump, wall in the sky, climate change, chemicals, pray. Donald Trump may come back, dangerous wall in the sky plan to fight climate change, warns Watchdog. Experts at Harvard University say it may take too long for the world to switch to renewable solar energy. What? Oh, a controversial plan called Wall in the Sky to reflect sunlight could win support from the Trump administration because it appears to offer a way to keep burning fossil fuels while reducing global warming. build a huge wall in the sky. Well, I believe, what's his name? Andrew Yang, he had the proposal of building a giant like glass thing that would like weaken the sun's rays or something like that. So it's not the first one, but a wall in the sky that would like deflect the sun's rays. You know, I hate to be like this. I just want to say that, like, you know, in terms of climate change, we're not talking about a huge change in climate. Okay, we're talking about, you know, enough that it's certainly affecting things, but it's not like, you know, we're not talking about like 20 degrees, 30 degrees. And with something big, it's like deflecting the sun's rays, that could have a really big impact, right? You got to be very precise. If you're going to build a giant glass dome to like make the sun's rays weaker, you better get it exactly right. And if you're going to build a giant, you know, a giant mirror to like deflect the sun, you better get it exactly right. I'm sorry. I've seen, what is it? The movie Snowpiercer, where it's like, in order to stop global warming, they like shot a bunch of stuff into the atmosphere and they overdid it. And so it's winter all over the world. Don't do that. Don't do that. You know, I don't know. This is getting a little dangerous, right? If you're starting talking about building a giant mirror in space or a giant, you know, glass dome, or you're getting into some dangerous territory. You know, global warming might be bad, but don't fuck us up worse, okay? You know, like, you got to be careful with all of that. I don't know. I mean, you know, if you're building a giant dome in outer space, you got to be careful. Anyway, we're in sci-fi territory tonight. Oh my goodness. This is oh man, what night is this? It's Maundy Thursday, right? This is Maundy Thursday. This is the craziest Maundy Thursday. When I was a kid, Maundy Thursday, we went to the church. We had like a Passover dinner, and then we would like they'd read from the Bible about the Last Supper of Jesus. Like, you know, but here I'm on Maundy Thursday, and I've got Vegan Gains, some, you know, fitness streamer coming on to debate me about China, and fake Garland Nixon, who's actually a dude with a dildo, and oh my goodness, this is a wild, wild stream. But you all are here. You all are here, and we love you. So thanks for being here, everybody. This is wild. I am having a good time. You just have to have a good time with this shit, right? You just have to have a good time. I will say I'm ready for it to be not winter anymore. Let me put it that way. So isn't the bastardization of the communist movement the same as what happened to feminism, anti-war and equal rights movements in the 60s, or gay rights in the 90s, corporate commodification? No, it's not. It's not. Okay. What you're describing, you know, in the 90s, right, there was, you know, there was a feeling on a lot of like Gen Xers, right, and that a lot of these causes had lost their grassroots enthusiasm. But what we're describing is something completely different here. I mean, you know, feminism became watered down, right? Became kind of a gimmick, right? You know, LGBT stuff became part of the Democratic Party, HRC. I mean, you know, all of that is just kind of watering things down. But this is something very different, right? When people who call themselves communists now at this point are advocates of degrowth. They want to degrow. They want people to be poorer. They think wealth is bad. The whole point of communism is to have a rationally planned economy to unleash the productive forces to have economic growth. And these people think growth is bad, right? At that point, you're changing the very essence of what a movement stands for. Stalin has 5-year plans where he's mobilizing the country to go out and build and go out and construct, you know, and then, you know, now communists say growth is bad. You're not watering it down. And that was the point that I made in the opening chapter of my BreadTube book, right? Social democracy, right, is a watering down of Marxism. What is going on now with the woke left is not a watering down. They have created something completely different, something with different goals, something with a different attitude, something that is very, very dangerous. You know, I mean, Marxism is a movement about empowering people, right, to take control of society. These people think people are inherently bad because they want more and there's too many of them and they need to be poorer. You know, so, I mean, they have changed the very essence of what we're talking about, right? You know, I mean, having a planned economy, overcoming the anarchy of production, and having centralization of the means of production so that productive forces can be unleashed. that's what it's always been about, right? That's what it's always been about. That's what it was about with the Soviet Union. That's what it was about with Stalin. That's what it was about with Mao. That's what and these people don't want economic growth, and they don't want centralization of the means of production. And it's not about the people taking control of the economy. They think the people are bad. It's like, this is a completely different thing. It's not a watering down. It's a completely different thing, right? At this point, woke leftism and communism are not the same thing. And that said, we're in a new stage. These are wild, wild times for sure. These are wild, wild times. So, could you please talk about the Christian communist movement and the impact that the collapse of feudalism had on sects like the Waldensians, the Cathars, and the Apostolic Brethren? I can't comment on those specific sects. What I will say, though, is that that a big factor in bringing down feudalism was what they called the peasant wars. And in Germany, there was a peasant uprising against feudalism, and it created like a socialist commune in Germany, like a socialist peasant commune. And this frequently happened in feudalism. In feudalism, there's a bit of a cycle where, feudalism, the productive forces are not increasing. They're not increasing technology for the most part. It's subsistence farming. And in feudalism, you do have a problem with that. You're not increasing productive forces. So as a result, the amount of food you're growing is not growing, and the population is growing. And that's why every 100 years or so in feudalism, you had what was called the millenarian phase, where there would be food shortages, and the peasants would start rising up and overthrowing their landlords. There would be prophet-like figures who'd be leading the peasants to rise up. They think the end times were coming. They think the second coming of Christ was coming. They were usually whipping themselves and flagellating themselves. That was part of it. And there would be big uprisings and chaos and a lot of death. And then that would kind of reset everything, and then they'd go back to as it was. And these were the peasant wars that happened in feudalism. And that was part of the feudal process. This happened in China. This happened in Europe, and it was just part of what happened in feudalism. Often in the peasant uprisings, the peasants would create some kind of egalitarian socialist commune. It wasn't socialist in the sense the workers controlled the means of production. It was like socialist in the sense the peasants together owned the land. They didn't have a landlord, right? A great example of that is the diggers, right? The diggers during the English Civil War, right? You had feudalism battling early capitalism. Urban capitalism in English cities were battling against the monarchy, the king. It was the parliament was at war with the king. And the parliament represented the urban capitalists. The king represented the aristocracy of the rural areas. So the peasants were being mobilized to fight for the king. Some of them didn't want to fight. The workers of the cities were being mobilized to fight for the capitalists. And that was the English Civil War. The Roundheads and the Cavaliers. The Roundheads were the working class people in the cities, and the Cavaliers were the monarchists, and they fought. And in the English Civil War, you had what was called the Diggers, where they were a group of peasants who didn't want to fight for the king. And so they seized control of St. George's Hill, and they created like a utopian socialist agrarian commune. And that was frequent during feudalism. You would have peasants rise up and overthrow the landlords and create, peasant socialism, agrarian socialism. And that happened all throughout, and in China, you had the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom, right? And that was the Taiping Uprising that happened. The Taiping Uprising was, it was this guy who, I guess he met some Christian missionaries, and, he thought he was Jesus's younger brother. And so he organized the peasants of China to fight against the emperor. And there was a big civil war. And it was that cycle of, every so often, the feudal society, because of the crises within feudal society, the fact that feudalism doesn't allow technology to progress, you have peasant uprisings that leads to a temporarily existing agrarian socialist commune, right? And the Taiping Heavenly Kingdom that battled against the Chinese emperor in I think the 1860s. That was an example of that in China, but you had it in Germany. You had it in England. That happened in feudalism. But feudalism would always overtake it, would always reassert itself, because ultimately they had the same mode of production. They were subsistence farming. They were just doing it in a more egalitarian way. Feudalism is a much better way of running subsistence farming than some kind of egalitarian, democratic, cooperative way of doing it. The Narodniks in Russia, they were before the Bolsheviks, before Marxism in Russia, you had a peasant socialist movement called the Peopleists, or the Narodniks, the Friends of the People, and they wanted to do that, right? And Peter Kropotkin was from the anarchist tradition. They wanted to create agrarian socialism. Agrarian socialism these are peasant movements, peasants rising up and seizing their land and creating farms that are owned by everybody instead of having a landowning aristocracy. That's a frequent thing that happens in feudal societies. In feudal societies, peasants are very brutally oppressed, and it gets to a point where the conditions of society economically cause unrest. Peasants rise up, they seize control of the area for a while, and they hold the land in common, and they do kind of an agrarian socialism thing, and then feudalism retakes them. It's kind of a cycle that happens in feudal society. It's kind of interesting. It's wild. It's wild how these things work, but yeah. Wild. All right. What's the next Rumble rant we got here? China is not financing its economy like the West. The UK's problem is that it's a cesspool, a cesspit of money laundering and casino economics. China is industrial power developing rural self-sufficiency. All right. American food. Yeah, I mean, what that guy was saying, I feel like I wasn't, I was trying to not have a hostile debate with the guy, and I didn't know he was a big YouTuber. I'm not YouTube savvy enough to know that guy's a big YouTuber. And but I guess he came on and he was saying there's not really economic growth happening in China since the Chinese Communist Party came to power. And I'm just like, sorry, dude, like that's just not reality. And I mean, anyhow, and when he said that the thing about the 90s and how the life expectancy went up in the 90s in Russia, like, whoa, that was, yeah. Anyhow, that was wild. That was absolutely wild. But, I need to figure out how I'm going to handle that, though. I need to think about how to handle that. Anyway, I'll discuss that with other people outside the stream. We'll figure out what we're going to do about it. But that was wild. That was wild. I probably need to, yeah, that was wild. Let me just put it that way. All right. So what's the next Rumble rant? Leo Messi says, American food. And is that much worse than other countries, like your Bob Evans or your fucking soul food versus taco or, well, look, Leo Messi, I'll be honest. American food is bad for you, right? And whenever I go overseas, I lose weight, right? Because I eat food that's not American food, that's pumped full of, fattening stuff, right? I will say I love American food. I live in New York City, and Mexican food in New York City is not good. But when I get out of New York City, when I'm traveling around the country, I eat Mexican food in other parts of the country. Heavenly. I love to eat at Golden Corral. That's awful for you. Good food. I love it. Bob Evans. I love it. All that stuff is awful for you. I love it. I will say. But it's not good for you. And if you go overseas, the food, the meat, the vegetables, it's all healthier for you. It's all much healthier. Right. And that's why, RFK, when he talks about make America healthy again, he's right. He's right. The way we eat here, the way we eat here is not good. It's not good for your health. So yeah, he's not wrong. That said, I do love Midwestern American food that I can't get in New York City. That's the pleasure of going out of the city for me, is eating at restaurants that I can't get in New York City. So now I'm going to do the super chat questions that have come in. We've got two of them, I believe, right? Two. We got Mariah and Gabby. Mariah and Gabby. So Mariah says 4chan has been exposed to be a government operation. Okay, so there's a big implication there, because I remember when 4chan was first getting going, the first big thing they did was go after the Church of Scientology. All right, do you remember that? That was like the first thing they did, and it was weird But 4chan mobilized a day of action against the Church of Scientology. If they were a government action, the Church of Scientology needs to sue the American government for violating their religious freedom. If the government set up an internet activist group and the first big thing they did is target a church, that is a huge violation of the First Amendment, right? And I mean, I'm not on here to defend Scientology, whatever, I've never done it, whatever, but not my cup of tea. But I remember when 4chan, it was like, what do they call them? The B-tards, and they were, and then they had 4chan. And I remember the first big thing that 4chan did was they mobilized a big day of action, global day of action against the Church of Scientology. If it is proven that 4chan was a government operation, 4chan, at that point, the Church of Scientology needs to sue the American government. They need to sue them. And that points to, so if 4chan, which is this weird internet web forum, if 4chan was a government operation, which is what Mariah has sent articles and says is now revealed, a lot of people's rights have been violated because 4chan was all about doxing people. 4chan was all about exposing people's identities online. 4chan was all about, a lot of people have been harmed by the government, if that is the case. And that's the whole thing about counter gangs, right? Counter gangs, right? Is that, rather than, it looks bad for the government to target somebody, so they find somebody who looks like they're just a vigilante or actor to do it for them, right? And that's how the intelligence games are played, right? You don't want fingerprints, right? So yeah, if 4chan, a lot of people suspected 4chan was a government operation, and they were anti-Syria. They mobilized against the Syrian government, and they were bad. They were on the wrong side of a lot of things. But if that's the case, if 4chan is revealed to have been a government operation, the Church of Scientology, but many other people have had their rights very, very severely violated. Mariah, that's what I take from that, is that a lot of people have had their rights very, very severely violated. So, and also I will say this internet culture, is cringe. It's cringe. It's absolutely cringe. So, 4chan has very much contributed to that. So, yeah, there we go. Interesting. So, next, so the next super chat that came in, it was from Gabby. She said, "Explain your childhood and teenage years in Ohio. Are you my shrink?" All right. Should I get on my couch and we'll just sit here and I'll relive all my pain? I'm just kidding. I know it's not what you mean, Gabby. But you said, "Explain your childhood and teenage years in Ohio. I'm always intrigued with how small town suburban people live. Seems like a very simple type of lifestyle. How old were you when you got culture shock on certain things living in the city?" Well, it's not that simple. I will say this. I had an uncle who died when I was 11 years old. And my uncle lived in Evanston. He lived in Evanston, Chicago, the suburb of Chicago called Evanston. He was a theater professor at DePaul University. He taught theater. And he was my hero. He was in a few Hollywood movies. He had, been an actor in Britain. And I thought my uncle was the coolest guy ever. And I believe the year the millennium, it was late 90s. It wasn't the year 2000, but late 90s, like 97, 98. I went with my family to Evanston, Chicago for New Year's Eve with him and his friends. And it was the coolest thing ever. They had this apartment, this basement apartment in Evanston. And my uncle was there and all of his theater friends. I just thought this was like the coolest, most exciting thing ever. Right. I loved being in a city. I am very much a city oriented person. My parents are very outdoor oriented. I remember when I was a kid, my parents, they really liked hiking. And so they really wanted my brother and I to see the Grand Canyon. So we flew to the Grand Canyon, but we didn't fly to the Grand Canyon. You can't fly to the Grand Canyon. There's no airport there. But cheap flight we could find was to Vegas, because that's where, that's near the Grand Canyon, driving distance, right? And so we flew to Vegas. And I honestly thought Vegas was more exciting than the Grand Canyon because it was a city. And I was just like, whoa, and all the lights, and Vegas was very exciting. But then, we left Vegas, and, I was like, okay, we saw the Grand Canyon. The Grand Canyon was nice. I'm not opposed to natural beauty, but, I am just a very city oriented guy. I will say that when I moved to New York City, when I was living here, the first 3-4 months were very rough because it was like overwhelming. It was just go, go, go. There's something you can do all the time. And it was just, I had to learn to say no, right? There was political stuff. I was in a political group, and there was always something happening. Can you do this? Can you do that? And I had to learn I could say no, right? Because when I was living in Ohio, there was not very many political things. So any political activism thing I could go to, I definitely went to it because there weren't very many opportunities. When I moved to New York City, I had to learn to say no because there was something happening all the time. And the lights and the fast pace of the city, it was rough. I will say the first few months, I was just like, whoa, it was hard. It was stressful. It was overwhelming. But then I got used to it. I will say that New York City has really slowed down since the pandemic. It's not what it once was. New York City used to be a lot faster paced and a lot more exciting. Since the pandemic, it's not as fun as it used to be. But it's still New York City, but it's not the city that never sleeps anymore, especially if you're I'm in Brooklyn, the Bronx. I mean, everything closes down, I mean, it's not the city that never sleeps, like it once was. But yeah, it was rough the first months because it's just overwhelming. And then when I would go outside of New York City, I'd be bored. I'd be like, things slowed down. When I went up to Boston, I was like, oh, this is quiet. This is, calm. When I went, there are certain cultural differences. I'm not going to get into a huge amount of detail. I grew up, it's interesting. So, you have in America, you have urban areas, you have suburbs, and then you have rural areas. And, because I'm white, in case you didn't notice, I'm very white. Look at this. I am the whitest guy you've ever met. I'm when I would go in the locker room and change, I would take my shirt off and people would go, I'm blind. That's how white I am. I've got very, very light skin. I'm a redhead, but I'm a white dude. When I first got involved in activism, people who wanted to put me down, be like, you're a white boy from the suburbs. I am not from the suburbs. I am from a rural area. You look up the town I grew up in, Orrville, Ohio. I am from a rural area, right? Orrville, Ohio. When I lived there as a kid, the whole town had 10,000 people in it. Now it's about 8,000. Its population has decreased by about 20% since I lived there. My graduating class was 115 people, I think. Maybe a little bit bigger than that. Maybe a little bit bigger than that. But it was quite, and it was a small town, almost all Republican, and my family were Democrats, and we always felt like, I was taught creationism in school. I was, it was a very religious conservative area. And my parents both have master's degrees. My mom's a librarian. My dad ran an environmental nonprofit. And so because of that, I, there was a level of alienation, I feel like, my mom used to really like Garrison Keillor, the NPR, the Prairie Home Companion, it was a small town in Lake Wobegon, and it was the day of the annual pie crust eating festival. And, it was, I don't know, this is a certain small town liberal mindset that develops, right? Every small town, like the small town I was in, when I was there were a lot of manufacturing jobs. Smucker's Jelly was there. People worked at the Smucker's plant. The Smucker's plant is still there, but I understand half of the Smucker's Jelly is now made in Georgia, where it's non-union, right? But when I was a kid, Smucker's was all made in Orrville. There was a dairy plant that, processed milk, a dairy facility. There was like a couple other factories. There were like industrial jobs you could have. But every small town has its doctors, its lawyers, etc. And they tend to be Democrats. They tend to be liberals, kind of. They're, whereas your working class folks in small rural towns tend to be Republicans. I also noticed in my town that one's religion had a lot to do with their income, with their job. And I thought that was interesting. I grew up in the United Church of Christ, the UCC, which was a mainline Protestant church. It had been the Swiss Reformed Church, then it merged into the United Church of Christ. My church, there were doctors, there was lawyers, there was, it was, middle class kind of people, that were there. And it was a fairly liberal church. You could believe what you wanted, basically. The church also hosted Alcoholics Anonymous and AA. So there were a lot of people who ended up joining the church because they had, gone to AA there. The church also had a fairly liberal attitude toward divorce, which again, nowadays, like, even very conservative churches divorce, but in my little town, there was still kind of a religious stigma on divorce. But so there were a lot of people who had joined the church because they got divorced, and the fundamentalist church they'd previously been a member of told them they weren't allowed to do that or whatever. So, it was a liberal church. And, there was also a Methodist church in town, and the United Methodists are pretty liberal as well. There was no Unitarian church in my town, but there was a town nearby that was a college town, Worcester, and they had a Unitarian church. And it was, that's your upper middle class, your middle class people, your doctors, your lawyers, your college professors. They are mainline Protestants. Then, there were people that sold real estate, realtors. There were people that owned car dealerships, right? And those folks tended to be Roman Catholic. Not overwhelming, but, they tended to be Roman Catholic, and in some cases they made more money than your doctors and your lawyers did because they were in sales, or they were like in marketing, right? They didn't have to have as much education and all of that. And then it tended to be people who worked in factories and all of that. They were evangelicals. And in my town, there was a huge mega church. I think it was called the Orville Christian Church, and it was huge. They would get thousands of people there on Sunday morning, at least 1,000 people. And they had a big movie screen at the front, and they had a praise band, they called it, and they were evangelicals, right? And they were non-denominational evangelicals. And there was a couple Baptist churches, and that was the old thing. So the area that I grew up in, I remember like half of the people I went to school with had German last names. My first grade teacher was Mrs. Wenger. My second grade teacher was Mrs. Schumacher. My fourth grade teacher was Mr. Hurst. My fifth grade teacher was Miss Hines. My sixth grade teacher was Miss Pricing. I had a teacher whose last name was Seifried, which is Siegfried, right? It's the Wagnerian character Siegfried, the mythology. I had Siegfried, Seifried, Steiner, and these were all Germans, right? And that Mennonitism was quite popular in the area. And a lot of people in my town, if you went one or two generations back, if they'd lived there for 2 or 3 generations, they had been Mennonites or Church of the Brethren or Apostolic or one of those old German religions. And what that was in 1848 in Germany, you'd had the revolution, the German Revolution of 1848. And who were the most of the people in Germany fighting to create a new Germany? Protestants, right? Brethren, Apostolics, Anabaptists, right? And it was, it was Protestants, who had fought, to create modern Germany alongside Karl Marx, alongside August Willich and Joseph Wedemeyer, right? And the 1848 German Revolution failed. It failed because it was crushed, Marx fled Germany, Wagner fled Germany, etc. A lot of the people I grew up around had German last names, and that the old German religions were still there. We would see Amish people, right? I remember it was occasionally, I'd be sitting, we look out the window and there'd be a horse and buggy would drive by. It'd be Amish people. And along the side of the road, you'd see Amish people selling fruit, right? During the season where fruit was in season, there'd be Amish people along the side of the road selling fruit. A lot of the Amish people didn't speak English very well. They spoke Pennsylvania Deutsch, but you'd see Amish people. The Amish have great restaurants. There were a lot of very good Amish restaurants in Oroville. I remember there was a place called Dravenstadt's. It was amazing, really good broccoli cheese soup, and it was like an Amish themed restaurant. There was a restaurant called the Amish Door. A lot of people, went there and did things, right? And it was like they were like Amish themed restaurants and things like that, right? And it was, I don't know. I mean, you're asking me about my small town upbringing. I mean, I'm telling you about it. Folks were deeply conservative, and that, even, the modern evangelical stuff in terms of religion was the main trend, but you still had the old German religions also. You still had Brethren, you still had Mennonites, you still had Apostolics, etc. There was not polka. Polka is an Eastern European thing, Phobos. That's Eastern European. There was not polka music. That, you go up to Cleveland, right? You go up to the west side of Cleveland, the Ukrainians and the Polish folks and the Slovenians, they'll dance polka music. There was not polka music where I was growing up. It was not a thing. But the other thing about my town in particular that was unique was there was a stigma on alcohol, which, again, modern conservative religious folks have no problem with alcohol. But in my little town, there was still kind of a feeling that I remember the teachers in their contract, it was said that they couldn't be seen there was one bar in town. I think there were two places in town that had a liquor license, Jerry's Bar and there was a restaurant, the Starboard Side Cafe, and they both had their liquor license. You could get alcohol there. But the teachers in their contract, it was said that they could not be seen at Jerry's Bar, and they could not be seen they couldn't be seen at these places that served alcohol, because that would be a bad example for the school kids. The school kids would see them there and drink, right? And that there was like a feeling that drinking alcohol was a sin, right? That it was wrong. That was very much part of the culture still, which is not normal for religious conservatives. That's kind of unique to the area that I grew up in. I mean, there was beer and wine, etc. I mean, it was on it. People bought and people drank, but there was still like a feeling among the religious folks in town that one should not drink alcohol. That drinking alcohol was a problem, and that teachers complained about it. That if they wanted to go to a bar and have a drink, they had to drive to another town, or else they could lose their job, because it was in their contract that they could not be seen at the one place in town that had a liquor license. I don't know. You hear other like weird things. I remember there was a big deal when my town outlawed, I guess people would make explosives out of pop cans, right? There was some kind of bomb. It was you would like put fireworks inside of a pop can or something like that. And it was called an Amish bomb. And that's probably like racist or offensive. That's what people called it. And high school kids, when I was in elementary school, high school kids were buying fireworks and mixing them into pop cans and making explosives, and people got hurt. And so my town passed a city ordinance. You could not make an Amish bomb. You couldn't make an Amish bomb, they called it. Another thing people did, they shot potato guns. That was a thing. People would get a big cardboard tube and they would shove a potato down it, and they would spray hairspray in the bottom of it, and they would light it, and the potato would shoot out. And they would they would call it it was shoot potato guns. That was a thing people liked to do. Potato guns. And that was like dangerous. I'm sure somebody got hurt, and I don't think it was cardboard. I think it was like a metal tube or something, but you would get a big tube and you would shove a potato down it, and then you would spray hairspray into the end of it, and then you would light it with a lighter, and the potato would shoot out of it. That was a thing people used to do, believe it or not. I'm sure that's completely illegal now. I'm sure that's, that's like having a gun or something, right? But people used to do that. They would shoot potato guns. Yeah, creative ways to cure boredom. One thing that I do recall that was interesting, fighting. And this is one thing I've the culture has really changed. Fist fights happened, right? When I was in school in 8th grade, I got into a fist fight. I got suspended from school for a week, and that happened, right? People got into fist fights. That's what happened. Police didn't get involved. Nobody went to jail. Nobody sued anybody else. Honestly, the fist fight I got into was the fault of the teacher. The teacher wasn't there. We were waiting for the teacher to show up. It was in an empty classroom. The teacher wasn't there, and one kid decided to entertain himself by bullying me. And next thing you know, we had a fist fight, and we both got suspended from school for a week. Well, but fist fights happen. They were just part of life. And, I got suspended. It was, 5 days out of school for getting into a fist fight. But you go back 2 or 3 years before that, or maybe 5, 10 years before that, you wouldn't have even gotten suspended. Nothing happened. It was just part of life. And that there was much, it's weird. And this is something the older people in my town would talk about. Nowadays, we're much more tolerant, right? You can be gay if you want to be gay, right? You can, interracial marriage is allowed. Interracial dating is allowed. We allow, people can do things they weren't allowed to do in the past, but there's a lot more strictness about stuff like fighting, right? If you, like nowadays in my town, if you get into a fight with another kid at school, the police are coming and taking away you in handcuffs in my little town, that's wild, right? It wasn't like that when I was a kid. That's how it is now. And that's how it is in pretty much all the United States. If a kid in school punches another kid in school, he's going to jail. His parents are going to have to come and get him out of jail. I don't think that's good. I don't think kids should punch each other, right? We should teach kids not to fight each other. But on top of that, I don't think kids should get dragged away to jail for breaking that rule. And kids need to learn to advocate for themselves, right? So, and that, you talk, even older people in urban areas. I would talk to older communists. They'd say if you had an anti-war demonstration, it was just common for somebody to come and punch you, and you would punch them back. There used to be a lot of violence in American society. There used to be a lot more just violence in everyday life. People would get mad and hit other people. People would get mad. People got in fist fights in the workplace. People got in bar fights. Kids fought in school. People fought each other on the street. And that was just part of life. Our culture has gotten to the point that is not, people sue other people. People get arrested. We don't do that. Is that good or bad? I don't know. Because, on the one hand, we're all safer from being assaulted. Okay, that's good, right? We're a lot less likely to get attacked. So that's good. But on the other hand, we've all been kind of, weakened because we all don't know how to defend ourselves. And we're all there's a lot more encroaching, of police state stuff into our everyday lives. That's one thing. When I went to Russia, when I went to Iran, when I went to, anti-imperialist countries, and people say it's the same thing in China. These countries are much more quote unquote authoritarian than the United States, meaning that, you don't have free speech. Well, you have free speech in Russia, except now they're in the middle of a war. It's a little bit different. You have free speech, but you don't have the same level of free speech that you have in America in a lot of anti-imperialist countries. Let me put it that way. But, you can get into a fist fight. No big deal. In Iran, I saw people driving motorcycles on the sidewalk, and I would jump out of the way so I didn't get hit by a motorcycle on the sidewalk, and I remember I said to the Iranians, is that allowed? And they're like, well, it's technically illegal. We just no one cares. And in New York City, if you rode a motorcycle on the sidewalk, they would drag you to jail. They would take your motorcycle, they would handcuff you and take you to jail. You'd be lucky to get out in 26 hours. They would fuck you up in New York City if you rode a motorcycle on the sidewalk. In Tehran, it's technically illegal, but they don't care, right? And it's it's weird. We're a lot, even though in America you in theory have more freedom of speech, more freedom of religion. If if you're someplace and someone insults you and you have a fist fight, you might as well count on being in court for the rest of your life. If you ride a motorcycle on the sidewalk, you're never going to see your motorcycle again. Let me put it that way. And there's a lot of ways in which U.S. society is a lot stricter about there's a lot less freedom in everyday life here than there is in a lot of countries we consider to be more authoritarian. And that's really since the 1980s. That started in the 1980s. And in the 90s, it escalated and all that. But like you go back to the 1970s, before the war on drugs was a really big turning point, a really big negative turning point, I must say. Right? We know that drug culture was created by the CIA, MK Ultra, and all of that. But drug culture hit American society, and a lot of people got hurt. A lot of people became drug addicts. A lot of people died from overdoses. A lot of families were hit. And then there was a blowback called the war on drugs. And the war on drugs kind of opened the door to a level of authoritarianism in everyday life that really changed America in ways that, our culture has really changed, right? And it's not just drugs, but when it became to the point you went to prison for using drugs, right? That was a new level of authoritarianism. And it was a mass media campaign of scaring people, terrorizing people, oh my God, your kids are going to become addicts and they're going to die. And, making people really afraid of drugs. Drugs, you should be afraid of drugs. They're bad, but, really amping up people's fears in order to justify a level of authoritarianism that's awful. And it was racist too. It was the black community was targeted in ways that white people were not targeted, right? Black people got arrested for using drugs when, there was a lot of drug use among white people that was not punished in the same way. And there's drug laws that they've talked about, certain laws that were used. And I mean, the black community was scapegoated and targeted, and that the propaganda that was used to justify it was aimed at suburban whites mainly. And it was to convince suburban whites that drugs were a black thing, right? Drugs were a black thing. And so we need strict drug laws so this black problem of drugs doesn't come into your nice white community. That was the kind of the way. It was implied. It wasn't stated directly, but it was implied. And the war on drugs really, really opened the door to a lot more authoritarianism in everyday life in America. People, in the 70s in my town, people talked about people used drugs. I mean, it was, again, if anyone was gay, they got the shit kicked out of them, right? Interracial dating was very taboo and very forbidden. So they weren't free in that sense. But, people used drugs and didn't go to jail. And people got into fist fights and nothing happened. You know what I mean? And that it's very weird, right? That there was kind of, we've kind of changed very much. There's a lot more authoritarianism in our culture now, in a lot of ways, even though we're more tolerant at the same time, right? Like part of the authoritarianism is that we have to be more tolerant. We're not as racist as we used to be. We're not as, we respect people's right to be different, right? We're not as rigid, with bullying around, it used to be, a boy wears a pink shirt, everyone would call him gay for the rest of his life. We allow people to be non-conforming a lot more, right? People are allowed to be themselves a lot more, but there's also much more rigid enforcement of rules, right? And that's kind of a weird thing about how America has developed. It's wild. It's absolutely wild how these things are, right? It's absolutely wild. Gabby was asking me about small town life, and yeah. Yeah, it's wild. But does that answer your question, Gabby? Did I give you a fair picture of small town life? That's, I don't know. I don't know what to say about it. I was bored. I was very, 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 very bored. That's what I was when I was a teenager. I was bored out of my goddamn mind. I was bored. And the library, I was constantly ordering new books. I was constantly trying to learn. And the internet existed, but it was not what it is now. Like YouTube started when I was in college, I believe. Like there was no social media, so the internet existed, but it was nowhere near what it is now. And I was bored. I was very, very, very bored is what I was in my small town. I was very, very, very bored. I don't know what more to say about it. There's not much more I can say. I was just very, very, very bored. I was quite bored. And I wanted to get to the city as soon as I could, and get away from all of that. And I will say that I did very much. I was not an only child. I have a younger brother. But I will say that I'll say this. You knew everybody really well, right? Everyone that was like I went to high school with, you knew them. You know what I mean? You knew everyone really well. You didn't like them necessarily, but it was like you spent a lot of time with the same people, and you got to know people pretty well. So there's that. I'm trying to think what else. I don't know. I don't know. What do you want me to say? I'm trying to think if there's anything else I can tell you. You wanted to know about small town life. What is small town life? Everyone talks about everybody else. A lot of gossiping that goes on. Everyone's interested in everybody else. A lot of false rumors go around. And there's a lot of drama. And I wonder how my hometown has changed now that everyone has a phone with a computer in it. And now that the internet is what it is, I wonder how much the culture has really changed. But for example, things were very competitive, right? No, not that things were competitive, but it was almost like some kind of nepotistic hierarchy developed. For example, there was a kid who went to school with me. His dad was the police chief. Senior assembly. And it was like hours long. It was like 4 or 5 hours, and they would give awards to seniors, and the same 3-4 kids would win all the awards. And they were all people that were, their dad was the police chief, or their mom was the mayor, or, it was just, and it was abominable, really. And that there were certain people that just, their family was in a position of power in the town. And it was like teachers would be afraid to not give them an A, right? Because of the social consequences. I remember that, right? It was wild, right? And it was just like, things were quite nepotistic. And if your dad was the police chief, if your mom was the mayor, certain people got taken care of very, very much. And it was like, again, it was like there was a lot of if you're not good to this person, and that was the thing. But the social consequences for speaking out against that, were like, no one was going to speak out against that. I remember after 9/11, my family, we had hosted a student from Pakistan, right? And so before 9/11, I knew what Islam was because we had hosted a student from Pakistan, and he was from a Muslim family, and I knew what Islam was. So after 9/11, we're all talking about, we're watching all these videos, learning what Islam is, and I knew about it because I knew about it. And people were like, oh my God, a Muslim? Why would you know somebody who doesn't believe in the Bible, doesn't believe in Jesus? and people thought I might be a terrorist because I knew a Muslim. Why would you know a Muslim, right? Muslims are these scary people on the other side of the world that blow up buildings and kill people. And Caleb knew a Muslim, right? That's kind of how sheltered these people were, right? That I knew somebody who thought different, right? And there was a lot of that, right? A lot of there were no Jews. I mean, there were no, what did your Jewish friends say? There were no Jews. I mean, there just weren't any. I mean, apparently, there have been a couple Jewish families in my town since then, but when I was a kid, there were no Jews in my town. And that was the other thing is I remember arguing with people in high school about Israel and Palestine. People didn't know what Jews were. They thought Jews were Old Testament Bible characters. They thought Jews were Amish, right? Because, the Amish people have long beards like Hasidim do, right? They didn't understand what Jews were, right? I didn't really interact with Jewish folks until I was in college for the most part. I mean, because they're just, Jews are very much an urban people. And that's because of the pogroms, because they were never allowed to become peasants. Every time the Jews would become peasants, they'd get driven out of wherever they were. And Jewish culture is very urbanized, and that's global. That's just kind of a phenomenon. And so in rural areas, you don't really tend to have Jewish folks. You might occasionally, but it's not very common. Jewish folks tend to live in urban areas. That's just statistical. The way evangelical Christian conservatives think about Israel and stuff is very different than the way Jewish Zionists think about it. Christian Zionists and Jewish Zionists have very different motivations and beliefs. Very, very different motivations and beliefs. I'll say that much, right? People in my town did support Israel, but it was based on the Bible and the end times and all kinds of stuff. It wasn't based on, Zionist, the kind of standard Jewish Zionist narrative of we're so oppressed, we need our own country. It wasn't that. It was the Bible says that Israel will be set up so that the Jesus can come and defeat the Antichrist and stuff. It's a different thing, and they're not sensitive in the same way. They don't take offense to criticizing Israel. Right? They might disagree with you, but they don't. You're not attacking them, right? The way, when you talk to Jewish Zionists, if you say something's wrong with Israel, it's like you're a bad person. You're attacking me as a person. Christian Zionists don't think that. They just believe intellectually that based on their understanding of the Bible, you must always support Israel. That's kind of their belief. It's a little bit different. And I will say the majority of Zionists in America are not Jewish. They're Christians, right? That is a fact, right? There are far more Christian Zionists in America than there are Jewish Zionists. Mike Huckabee, more people that support Israel are like Mike Huckabee than like Netanyahu. And that's a fact that a lot of people are not aware of. Yeah, wild times. But yeah. Is this interesting to you, Gabby? Is this what you wanted to hear? I don't know. This is wild. We're actually approaching hour number 3, believe it or not. But I'm fine with that. What the heck, right? I had a long day. I was in Chinatown doing some filming, and I was going around the city, and we're in that weird not summer, not spring, not winter time, and it's messing with me, and my face is red from allergies and etc. So it's wild times for sure. Yeah, so I will cut that Vegan Gains clip because I guess he's somebody. I'm not sure how I'm gonna frame it though. I don't know if it would be smart for me, and I don't see it going viral. I'm not having a whole bunch of people tweeting at me and calling me a bad person, so I don't know. This is a strange world we live in. I don't know, but we are winning. I'll say that much. We are winning. Folks, I do want to just say this, right? I might as well just say this. This event is really important. This event is really, really, really important, right? And it's important because of what we bring up on these streams over and over and over again. How we need a mass movement in this country. There is no substitute for a movement. We've got to build an anti-imperialist movement, a movement that's pro-working families, a movement that is anti-imperialist, a movement that is about love and community and optimism and growth and building, not resentment, not jealousy, not tearing people down. We have to build this movement, and no one else is going to build it for us. The communists ain't going to build it. The libertarians ain't going to build it. We can work with libertarians. I invited a very prominent libertarian. Fingers crossed she can make it. We've got to build the Center for Political Innovation. And this event that we're doing will be pivotal. It will be the biggest event we have ever done. It's going to be at the Midwest Conference Center in Chicago, and it's going to be awesome. It's going to be tremendous. It's going to be big. It's going to be a really good event, and we need you there. We need you there. We need you to help us build it. We've got buses coming in from different places in the country. We're going to provide transportation, and we're going to work very, very hard to fill up that auditorium. But it needs to be done. Like, there's no substitute for building a mass movement right now. We need to build a mass movement, and we can't have World War III, and we can't have the low-wage police state that is continuing. We need to build a movement to demand a pro-growth government, a government that invests in people and in communities. That's what we need. We urgently need that. And this is my focus, right? If you ask me what my mind is set on, it's set on this, right? It's set on building this event. We need to have a major, in real life, anti-imperialist, pro-working families, pro-growth, anti-deep state gathering. We need to do it. This is what needs to happen. This event will change the course of the direction of this country. Look, 3 years ago, we had a conference in Chicago. Gabby was there. John was there. And that conference changed the course of the history of the country. You better believe it. The Uhuru movement had just been raided by the FBI, and we rolled out the platform for them. Tara Reid was there. Nick Brana of the People's Party was there. And that conference was pivotal. There were 75 people there. It wasn't huge, but that conference changed the course of the history of this country. That conference led to Rage Against the War Machine happening. That conference led to Tucker Carlson having the Uhuru movement on his show. That conference in Chicago, that conference really was a big deal. I'm going to show you a couple clips from that conference, if I can, because it was wild. It was a wild conference, but it was a pivotal moment. It was a test, right? Because they had just raided the homes of the Uhuru movement, and we immediately stepped up to the plate and said, how can we support them in any possible way? How can we be there for this group of Black revolutionaries that are under attack? It was key, and we were there for them, and we supported them, and Tara Reid was there, and we honored her. She's since had to flee the country, and now she's suing the American government for the way the Biden administration persecuted her. On top of that, I was blackmailed, and I don't want to get into that too much because it doesn't really matter at this point. But they did everything they could to try and prevent us from having that gathering, and we did it anyway. And we had an amazing, amazing conference in Chicago. It was great, and it was actually in Deerfield. We were out in Deerfield, of all places, the suburb of Chicago. And people came together, and Garland Nixon was there, and it was big, and it was a test. And I look at everything that has happened because of that conference that we had in Chicago, and I'm ready to go back to Chicago to have a conference that's 4 times as big, 5 times as big. I'm ready to do it because what we need to do is so much more urgent in these times than it was then, right? And now Donald Trump is trying to negotiate an end to the Ukraine war, and all kinds of things are happening. And yeah, I mean, it's urgent. At that conference, I talked about Noah's Ark. Noah's Ark. And about how Noah knew that there was going to be a flood. There was going to be a storm. And he started building an ark. And according to a popular interpretation of the story, people thought he was crazy. And then the floodwaters started rising. And Noah and his family were safe because they built an ark. Whereas the other folks drowned. And we're building an ark right now. And I basically used the analogy of an ark to describe the Center for Political Innovation. This country is falling apart. Imperialism is in crisis. We've got to build the ark. The storm is coming. The floodwaters are rising, and we've got to build the ark. And being famous on social media is not building the ark. And, you know, we've got to build the ark. We've got to build a network of people that are committed to stand with each other, that can support each other, and can endure for when the flood comes, because the flood is getting here. The waters are rising, and we've got to build the ark. And I have not stopped building this ark. I haven't stopped. And I've gotten more powerful. My power level has increased since that conference. I have met 2 presidents. Did you know that? Since that conference, 2 presidents. I've met 2 presidents. I've met the President Riazi of Iran, who died. I met President Putin in Russia, and I spoke with him. Since that conference, Peter Coffin and I have learned how to work together and to coordinate. We've done amazing things. We made films. Since that conference, we intervened in an election. My book on Kamala Harris that I wrote back in 2020 exploded in popularity, and 4,000 copies of it sold during the 2020 elections. And I became one of the main experts on the dangers of Kamala Harris and her psyche. Since that election, we did the Peace MAGA operation, where we were bringing a message of only peace can make America great again. We have done so much, but we're doing it all. We're doing it all because we're building a ship, because the storm is coming. The storm is coming, and we have got to build the ark. We've got to build the ship before the storm gets here. You can't wait until the storm comes to build the ship. You got to build the ship before the storm. And there's no way around it. And I guess what I've been trying to communicate to you all, right? Sometimes I get frustrated, but what I'm trying to communicate to you all is that I am here to get the job done. That's it. I am here to get the job done. That's why I'm here. And if you want to do the job with me, great. And if you don't want to do the job with me, get out of the way and let me do it. And that's what matters, is getting the job done. And I am disappointed. There have been a number of people who want to help get the job done, and then something comes up. And then they go on their way because they don't want to get the job done. But we have to get the job done. Peter is committed to getting the job done. I'm committed to getting the job done. We got a good group of folks here in CPI that are committed to getting the job done. They're committed to getting the job done. And that's good. And if you want to get the job done, you belong in CPI, and you're welcome in CPI. And if you don't want to get the job done, if you want to do something else, go someplace else. You know, I'm here to get the job done. And nothing really matters other than getting the job done. When the storm is coming and the floodwaters are rising, what matters is if you build the ark. Doesn't matter what your social media is. Doesn't matter what group you're in. Doesn't matter who stands next to you. Doesn't matter if so-and-so has cooties. What matters is getting the job done. And I'm trying my hardest, my damnedest to get the job done. That's what I'm trying to do. Where do you register? CPIUSA.org. Go to the website, right? Or there's a link to register for the conference down below, but you can become a dues-paying member of CPI on our website. I am here to get the job done, to build an anti-imperialist movement. That is what I am here to do. I ain't here to screw around. I ain't here to fuck around. I am here to get the job done, and nobody else is doing the job. And there's a lot of people screwing around and fucking around. And there's a lot of people who come around, have drifted into my circles, and then they just don't want to get the job done. You know, they want to make everyone fill out forms and be the boss and make people fill out forms. They just, we can't. We've got to stop doing stuff. We can't do it. I don't know what it is. Right. And people, and it's like, and the attack on me is always, Caleb, you're so dedicated to this. Yep. Caleb, you are just constantly wanting us to grow. Yep. Caleb, you never think about anything else but how CPI can expand and how we can build this movement. Yep. I am obsessed with CPI. I am obsessed with building an anti-imperialist movement. I am obsessed with getting the job done. And until we have built the movement that we need, and until we have a government of action that fights for working families, I am not going to be satisfied. And you know what? That's my job. That's my job. My job is to build this movement. And I'm proud of that. I'm committed to it. And if you want to help out, great. And I will empower you. And if you want to write, write. If you want to speak, speak. If you want to organize, organize. I'm all about it. I'm all about it. But if you want me to stop, if you want to be me and you feel like somehow you're not reaching the goal of being me, I don't know what it is, but I continue to deal with people who just, it's like they get mad at me for doing this. Well, look, I'm not going to stop doing this, right? And I've said before, we've had setbacks and all of that. I've said, I don't care if CPI is 3 people and I move back into my parents' garage in Ohio to stream. I'm not giving this project up. But we're not, that's not going to be the situation. We're going to have 400 people in that auditorium in Chicago. That's what we're going to have. And we got door knockers going up, and we got books getting distributed, and we got guests coming, and we're kicking ass. We are kicking ass. And, you know, if you need to take a break, take a break. Right? If you need to slow down, slow down. If you got to take care of family, personal life, that's fine. But I ain't going to slow down myself. And I'm not going to stop building this movement. I am all in this game. I risked my life on a ship to Yemen trying to bring medical aid to the people of Yemen. I'd risked my life. I almost died. And I was the only American in an auditorium full of 20,000 Iranians chanting death to America. And I've met people from Donetsk and Lugansk who wish they could be in college right now, but they're fighting on the front lines to protect their communities, to keep the World War II memorials up, to make it so their mom and dad can go shopping without shells paid for by American tax dollars raining on their heads. I'm in this. And I've been to Central Caracas, and I've seen the people in the Bolivarian communes who say, God brought me to this planet to die for Hugo Chavez, to die for my community, to die fighting against imperialism, and that is what I'm going to do. I've been to Venezuela, and I've been to Iran, I've been to the Gulf of Aden, I've been to Russia, I've been to Crimea. And I understand what the main danger to humanity is, and I understand who the main enemy of America's working family is. And it's not Muslims, it's not Iranians, it's not Cubans, it's not Russians, it's not Chinese people. The main enemy of America's working families is the big banks and monopolies that have been robbing this country and looting this country, that have allowed our roads to crumble, that have allowed our power grids to fall apart, that have been driving down our wages and our living standards. And it's about time the working people of America join arm in arm with the people of the world to defeat this imperialist system. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. We got to break the power of the big monopolies. We got to break the power of the big banks. And we need a government that builds. We need a government that invests in people. We need a government that teaches your kid to be smart, to be an engineer, to be a scientist. We need a government that invests in human beings and their creative power, a government that unleashes human beings to do amazing things. We need a government of action to fight for working families. We need to destroy this imperialist monster, this system that puts profits over people, that grinds nations into poverty. We need to defeat this Roman Empire, British Empire, oligarchical order. And we need to build a new America. We need to build a new America where working families come first. We need to build a new America that trades with countries on the basis of win-win cooperation. A new America that paves roads. A new America that invests in new technology. A new America that's not fighting against the Palestinians. It's fighting against poverty and unemployment and homelessness. It's eradicating scarcity and it's unleashing human growth. I am pro-growth. I am pro-working families. I am pro-humanity, and I am anti-globalism, anti-imperialism. Working families first. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. This system that puts greed and profits ahead of everything else, that says human beings don't matter, that human beings are a cancer on the planet, that there's overpopulation. We're going to grind and we're going to destroy that system. We need a government like Ibrahim Traoré in Burkina Faso, where mothers can go to the doctor for free to give birth to their children, where he's trying to drive up the food supply by having an agricultural explosion, where he's decided that college students get paid. They get a check from the government. They get a paycheck for going to college because they need smart people to make Burkina Faso a strong country. In Burkina Faso, they've got a government of action. And that government of action is raising the food supply, and it's increasing the life expectancy and increasing the population. And that's a pro-humanity, pro-growth, anti-imperialist, anti-monopoly government. We need to defeat the power of the big monopolies. And we need to unleash human growth and human creativity. We need to create abundance. We need to expand the productive forces. That is what we need. We need the godlike creative abilities of every human being to be unleashed in a way that the world has never seen. We need a government of action to fight for working families. And that's what I'm for. And I know how evil this imperialist system is. And I know what the imperialists have done in the Middle East. And I know what the imperialists have done in the Donbass and the Donets. And I know what the imperialists have tried to do to China. And I know what the imperialists have done on the Korean Peninsula. I know what the imperialists have done in Latin America. And I know what the imperialists have done in Ohio and Pennsylvania and Texas and Illinois and Idaho and all the places where their opioid epidemic and their degrowth and their prison industrial complex. Oh, I know what they've done. And we reject imperialism. We reject globalism. And we're pro-humanity. We're pro-growth. And that's what I'm all about. And that's what I'm all about. I am an innovationist. I am a celebrator of the human spirit. And I believe in the potential of every human being being unleashed. And that's what I'm here to preach to you, and that's what I'm here to advocate. And that's the movement that I am building. That's the movement that I'm building. And I need you to become part of that movement. And part of that movement is relentless optimism. And part of that movement is marching ahead. And part of that movement is being motivated by love and optimism. And we've learned a lot. This is stream 886. Can you believe it? Stream 886. We've been going 886 live streams, but here we are. Well, long live innovationism. Long live innovationism. We are marching ahead. We are the future. The Center for Political Innovation is innovating. We are pioneers. We are cutting edge. And we are on the edge of a great new world. We are breaking new ground, and we are doing utterly amazing things. And there's a love in our community that you won't find other places. This isn't about hate. This isn't about personal gain and competition. There's a reason Gabby's been here since the beginning. There's a reason that people have stayed, and people have been here. They feel that energy. They come to one of our events and they feel it. You come into the room at a CPI gathering when we're chanting, dare to struggle, dare to win, and you feel that energy. There is something spiritual and beautiful about our movement that you will not find in some red beret communist joker organization. You won't find in some hate fest, some pessimistic leftist woke cancel culture convention. There's something special about what we do. We do something utterly amazing with the Center for Political Innovation. And if you've been in the room with us, you will know what that is. There is something there. There is an electrical power in what we do. And it is dynamic, and it is powerful, and it's beautiful, and it is going to light this country up. And there is going to be innovation circles in every corner of this country. We're going to build our own building in Chicago. We're going to build our own building in Los Angeles. We're going to build our own building in Pennsylvania. We are going to have innovation centers across this country. We are going to have outreach projects and community projects, food banks, and you better believe what we're going to do. We are going to kick ass. It's not going to be a fake social media campaign. It's going to be a real campaign. People are going to feel alive. They are going to awaken from the slumber. They are going to stop living biologically and going through the motions, and they're going to awaken, and they're going to build and construct, and they are going to push back against this satanic pessimism and degrowth that has come over our society. And we are going to wipe out the low-wage police state, and we are going to have a government of action that fights for working families. And we are going to build, and we are going to love, and we're going to have a new world beyond imperialism. World War III is going to be something people can't even imagine. They can't even imagine Russia being our enemy. They can't even imagine Iran or China being our enemy. They can't even imagine what life was like before all the continents were connected with high-speed railway, before there was intercontinental highways connecting the whole world, before there was a bridge over the Bering Sea, before there was fusion energy providing all kinds of electrical power like you wouldn't believe. We are gonna do amazing things. We are part of the coming explosion. We are part of the coming explosion. We are marching ahead and leading humanity forward towards something new, exciting, and optimistic. And we are all so goddamn lucky to be alive in this time. So lucky that God chose us to be born in this time, in this era, because we're doing something special and we're doing something amazing. And I'm really glad that night after night after night, I've been able to get on here and share this with you. Because our mission is the most important thing going on in this country right now. And I'm really glad that you have the opportunity to be part of it. Because we have so much work to do, and I am obsessed, and I am not backing down, and I am dug in, and I am in this for real. We are fighting, we are winning, and dare to struggle, dare to win. We are winning, everybody. Don't you forget it, and don't let this evil world and all the pessimism mongering going on, don't let it take you down. Don't let it weaken you, and don't let it isolate you, and don't let it atomize you, and don't let it push you into thinking you can't change the world. You can change the world because we're a small group of people in CPI, and we have changed the world so much already. They're scrambling to keep up with us because we've done so much to change the world. And you can be part of it. You can be part of it. So let's do it. Let's do it, folks. The only thing missing is you. The only thing missing is you. So you got to get involved. We need you. We need you. We need you. And it's not easy, and it's difficult sometimes. Some days are easier than others, but we need you. We are going to kick ass in Chicago. Dare to struggle, dare to win. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.